Hi everyone. Good to see you on my channel today. Today I will tell you a wonderful story. It is full of love and kindness. I hope you enjoy it and I wish you an enjoyable viewing experience. Thank you.
Hi. Someone tapped her just below her back. At that moment, she was standing in the store, picking out groceries. Hi, she turned slightly, not even noticing who was saying hello to her. The young man walked past. Selena continued to pick out her groceries. So if I want to make a pizza, I need to buy more sausage and cheese. She spoke out loud so as not to forget anything. And when all the things she needed were stacked in the basket, she went to the juice shelf. At that moment, she wondered who it was that could behave so impudently. Look back, there was no one around. She went into another hall. She saw that young man. She noticed him because he was wearing a bright orange jacket, but she didn't recognize him. The interest was already so strong that Selena decided to approach him. He was looking at various cans of beer, apparently wanting to heat up his evening. When the girl got close to him, she couldn't believe her eyes. It was Alexander. Alexander was her neighbor. For a few minutes, Selena just stood there looking at him, a smile on her face. Probably he felt that look, turned around. "Alexander, hello," she said cheerfully. "I thought we already said hello." He did not understand. "Yes, when?" She was happy as if she had met a man on a desert island. "Like when 2 minutes ago I approached you." He continued to make his choice. "Alexander, Alexander, I didn't recognize you. I thought who could touch me so brazenly," Selena kept saying. "And what, you recognize who?" He was indifferent. "Well, what are you like? You're not happy. How many years we haven't seen you, a lot." She was ready to throw the basket and just disgorge him. "Why are you so happy?" He was still serious. "Oh my gosh, but if you don't want to socialize, I'll go. But know that I was very happy to see you." She wanted to turn around, but he stopped her. "Where to?" He held her hand. "To the checkout," she answered calmly, realizing that time had passed, and now this was not the man she had once known. "Wait a minute. What's your offense?" He looked at her the way he had once looked at her before. Selena remembered everything. She just couldn't help but smile. This was Alexander, the one she had so much in common with. They went to the register together, paid, and left the store. "What are you doing here?" he asked her. "I live," she answered, not knowing what else to say. "You were leaving," he wondered. She had left and come back. Celine didn't know if she was doing the right thing standing there talking to him. "Okay, I'm sorry for reacting to your joy like that, but I'm glad to see you too," he told her. "And you know what? Let's go visit me." Selena felt herself starting to get flirty with him. "And let's go," he said calmly. They walked together to her house. He took the package from her hands. What was going on inside her at that moment cannot be described in words. Some kind of awe, tenderness, and at the same time, everything was seething, incomprehensible. They came to the entrance. She opened the door, went up to the floor, entered the apartment. "Oh, what's going on here?" He was immediately surprised to see various construction materials in the corridor, broken doors, plastered walls. "Don't mind me. I've been working on it for a couple of months. I can't finish it," she said. "If you lived with me, it wouldn't be like this," he said, and shook his head. "Would it have been done already?" she said with a grin. "Of course, I'm a man. I have hands and they grow from the right place." Without taking off his shoes, he followed her into the kitchen. "Here, only here is a place where you can sit, and here I sleep." She pointed to the bed, which stood in the corner. "And when it's over?" he asked. "I don't know. There's still a lot of small work to do," Selena sighed, because she was really tired of living like this. "Like what?" he asked. "The baseboards need tearing off," she said. "I could do it right now, but unfortunately, there were no tools in Selena's house." Alexander promised he would come the next day and do it. That was very nice to hear because it was unknown when the workers would arrive. While he walked around the apartment and looked at everything that was there, Selena put the pizza in the oven as she wanted. There were glasses on the table, and she pulled out the wine. "Are you trying to get me drunk on wine?" he asked. "Why?" She looked surprised. "No, I have my own." He took a beer out of the bag. "Well, as you wish," she shrugged and sat down at the table. "And what smells so good?" asked the guest. "I put the pizza in the oven," She looked through the glass. You are also a good hostess, he told her. Alexander, enough, let's talk about who, where, what, she told him. As I lived here, so I live and work. What else to say? He looked at her. This look gave Selena goosebumps. What about your wife, your kids? She asked him. You remember Amy? She was divorced. He stopped talking and lowered his eyes. Was it a tough divorce? She asked him. No, he didn't say anything. Did she not let him see the baby? Selena remembered that when they were married, Amy was already pregnant. Don't ask about that, he asked. Okay, the girl thought, it's not that simple. She opened the oven, checking to see if the pizza was burnt. At that moment, Alexander stood up, walked over to her, took her hand. What are you doing? She turned to him, smiling. Yes, Amy and I divorced a long time ago, and as you know, we had a daughter, but she died recently. He held Selena's hands, lowered his head, and did not look at her. Oh, I'm so sorry, said the girl. And why? She looked up at him. Crashed her car. At this point, a stingy male tear rolled down his cheek. Shit, Alexander. She hugged him. How many years have passed? You can imagine that when they first met, they were so few years old, and now they sat down at the table again, not opposite each other, but next to each other. I always remembered you. He put his hand on her knee. And you, she deliberately did not turn to him, so as not to look him in the eye. When I saw you in the store, I wanted to come over. He took his glass. And before, that did not want to approach, laughed the girl. I have not seen you before. He put his head on her shoulder and gently touched her cheek with his lips. Alexander, don't, she pulled away from him. Why? He asked quietly in her ear. I'm afraid of you, she honestly admitted. What are you surprised, Alexander? No, I'm not afraid of you physically, I'm afraid of you morally. You're about to lure me again and then dump me. She knew him very well. Celine, he pulled her against him the way he had done before. She gasped at this tenderness, but she couldn't do anything because there really was some fear inside. You do realize, don't you, that this love of ours will never end? It was once and for life, he whispered in her ear. Alexander, we are adults. We should understand everything. She turned to him. At that moment, he started kissing her, and she couldn't resist. She answered his kiss. I can't live without you, he told her. And I don't believe you, she answered. They were lying in bed together. The pizza was getting cold on the table. Wine and beer were still poured in glasses. They didn't need anything but themselves right now. And you're still the same, he told her. And you're not, she turned away, now lying back and smiling. Have you gotten old? Alexander asked. Yeah, she laughed and turned to him. What was happening between them now could not be described in words. It was already just such a connection, which is inexplicable and intangible. Selena. She woke up to whispers in the morning. Alexander, did you and I fall asleep? She said in a sleepy voice without opening her eyes. I think we were. He kissed her. Today there was no need to go anywhere, so the girl was in no hurry. Why aren't you going home? She asked him. I don't want to, he answered her. Why don't you want to? She was lying there with her eyes closed, pressed against him. I don't want to let you go. He pressed her even tighter against him. Alexander, is it all true? Selena didn't believe it could be. What do you think? He whispered in her ear. I don't know. She really didn't know that. When it was already lunchtime, they had to get up, if only to have coffee. Do you want some? She pointed to the can. Yep, Alexander smiled. 1.5 spoonfuls of coffee and the same amount of sugar. She asked him. Do you remember? He stretched out. Of course, how could I forget? She poured the coffee into the mug. The sugar was more difficult because it was refined sugar. She added 1 cube, but with the second she had to labor to somehow saw half off with a knife. What are you doing there? He saw Selena tense up. Half sugar, she laughed and showed him the uneven lump. Well, you're kidding. You could have thrown in 2 or 1 would have sufficed. He got off the bed and walked over to her, hugging her from behind. I want to make you feel good, she said honestly. They heated up last night's pizza and sat down at the table, drinking coffee. Selena went to wash her face. Alexander followed her. Can I have a moment of privacy? She turned to him. No, again he put his arms around her and pulled her against him. I don't want to let you go for a minute. Now she pushed him out the door. After she washed her face, came and sat down next to him, she saw that Alexander was pensive. "What are you thinking?" She pressed against his cheek. "About you." He raised his eyes. "And what?" She stopped talking. "Nothing," he told her, stood up, went to the stove, poured water into his mug again. The kettle was probably already cold. She went there too, to help him. "Selena, are you alone?" he asked her, because he had been thinking about it since yesterday. "No," she answered seriously. "I knew it." He put the kettle back on the stove. "Do you know with whom?" Her lips smiled slightly. "I don't want to know. Please don't say." Alexander waved his head and went to the table. "Fool, of course. I'm now alone, but with you." She kissed him on the cheek. "Why are you scaring me so much?" He seemed to exhale. "Is that what you've been thinking about all morning today?" She wanted to hug the man. "Maybe," he answered. "No, I'm alone." She thought for a moment. "But you said you're not now." He put his arms around her, pulled her to him, and started kissing her again. They spent the rest of the day in bed, and when it was already deep into the night, Alexander burrowed into her hair and said he had to leave. "Wait at least until morning," she pleaded. "I have to go to work in the morning, so I need to sleep and be awake, and I can't do that with you." He got up and started to get dressed. She looked at this man and realized that he was right when he talked about love. "Will you come?" she asked. "What do you think?" He stopped, looked at her, and froze for a few seconds. "I think not." She didn't even think twice when she answered that question. "I don't promise that tomorrow or the day after tomorrow because it's a lot of work and I'm busy practically 24 hours a day, but closer to the weekend for sure." He leaned in, kissing her. At that moment, Selena stood up and followed him out into the hallway. "I'll be waiting." She ran her hand over his face. "I'll be there," he whispered to her. After that, he took his jacket and walked out of the door. The girl went to take a shower. Before, when she saw it in movies or heard someone singing in the shower, she'd always laughed at it. But today, she was singing by herself. She didn't care that the neighbors might hear it and think something of her. That when she went out, she just fell on her bed, lay there, staring at the ceiling, thinking and remembering about Alexander, about her beloved. Could it all happen again because they say you can't step in the same river twice, she told herself. She was so happy. She wanted to sing, to smile, to go outside, to give something to someone. She closed her eyes. Selena was just happy in that moment. But when Friday came, Alexander was not there. The girl thought that maybe he meant Saturday when he said he would come closer to the weekend. For some reason, now it occurred to her that they hadn't even exchanged phone numbers, and she could have dialed him now. Maybe it was for the best, she said aloud, waved her hand and stopped waiting for him. After all, it had happened more than once. Selena was in ninth grade at the time. At that time, it was such a happy time. Girls 15 years old, boys, discos, meetings, parties. She didn't think about anything, just lived her happy girl life. "What's that rumbling noise?" Once asked her mother when she heard that from the stairwell, loud voices and blows. "I don't know," replied her daughter. "Selena, well, look through the peephole," her mom told her. "It looks like someone is moving in." She looked there. "That's it. Our quiet life is over. Now the neighbors will come and it will begin," smiled the woman. The apartment next door had been empty for a long time, and since the house was very audible, it was clear that the neighbors would not sit in silence. They would start talking again. Music, it was already checked when the previous tenants lived here. "Mom, can I go get some bread?" Selena told her. "There's bread." She looked at her. "Well, for milk or whatever else is necessary, just to the store." I couldn't wait for the girl to leave the apartment and see who will live in the next apartment. "I see, for money, buy some vegetables and something for yourself." Her mother was not stupid and understood what the girl needed. Selena left the apartment. At that moment, two young guys were dragging a sofa. "Hello, are you guys moving into this apartment?" Selena pointed to the door. "Yep," nodded one of them with his head. They stopped on the steps to take a break. "I see, so we'll be neighbors," she said cheerfully. She couldn't get through because all the space was taken up by the couch. "I'm Alexander, and this is my friend John," said one of the guys. He was smiling. "And I'm Selena," she said. After the young men dragged the couch in, Selena went downstairs. She quickly went to the store. When she returned, she saw that the car wasn't fully unloaded yet and the guys were gone. She purposely slowed her gait to wait for them to come out of the driveway. And there they were. Wow, how much stuff you have. She pointed at the car. Yes, there's some. Alexander was still as cheerful as ever. Well, goodbye, she smiled, waved her hand and went into the entrance. So, who's coming in? Her mother met her in the hallway. Some young guy. Selena shrugged her shoulders as if she didn't care. She went to her room. She couldn't wait to go out tonight and tell her friends. In the kitchen, her mother cooked something, and then she was going to leave. Where are you going? The girl asked her. I'm going to throw out the trash in Leslie, she said about her friend who lived in the next house. All right, let me go out soon too, her daughter told her. Her mother left and Selena started putting on her makeup and getting ready to meet her friends. She hadn't had a chance to leave yet when her mother came back. Why are you looking at me like that? Her daughter asked her. What did you tell me today? Some young guy's coming over. He's young to me, but to you he's old. She took off her shoes. How old is he? The girl was indignant. Well, about 10 years older than you for sure. The mother went into the room. Selena at this moment. Selena jumped out of the apartment. When she met with her girlfriend, she spent the whole evening telling her about Alexander, what he was like, that he was going to live near her now. You should have seen him, she said with a gasp to her friend. Oh, Selena, enough with your neighbor, Hannah told her, because she was not interested. After that, no matter how many times Selena went to the store, the street, or anywhere else, she never once met Alexander. It wasn't that it was a shame, but she wouldn't have minded seeing him. Is your mother going to let you go to the disco tonight? Hannah asked. Why such questions? Has she ever not let me go? Selena didn't understand. Well, no, just the day before yesterday we came late. You said she was swearing, shrugged the girl. I think it'll be fine. Selena was always cheerful and upbeat. That's it, then we'll meet there as well. They went home after school. In the evening, as on other weekends, they met, chatted a little, and went to the disco. There they danced, both fast and slow dances. And so, when everyone gathered in the foyer to hang out some more after the disco, a guy approached Hannah. Selena realized that today they would go out not together with her friend, but with three of them and with her new boyfriend. The girl was a little hurt that she would be alone, but no one was thinking about that right now. When they came out, Hannah gave all her attention to the young man. She was talking to him. They were making out, kissing, laughing, as if Selena wasn't even with them. Okay, I'm going home, she said. No offense, Hannah turned to her. No, I'm not. Even though it wasn't true, she couldn't say it any other way. Through the deserted streets, Celine walked alone, and just as she turned into her yard, she saw a familiar figure. It was Alexander, but they weren't so familiar with him that she could so easily approach him, say something. To be honest, she couldn't even say hello to him because she was shy. Alexander at that moment also noticed his neighbor. Selena, he shouted at her. Yes, turned the girl, cheeks burning. Inside everything was shaking. She could not even say a word because she was afraid that her voice would shake. Are you going home? He asked her. Yes, she said again and thought to herself that she could have said something else. Do you want to go for a little walk? Alexander asked. Come on, she couldn't believe this was really happening. She'd been looking for a meeting with him for so long. And now, not only had they met, but he called her for a walk. Let's go sit on the bench over there. When they reached the park, he showed her. Let's go. Today, she was willing to do anything just to be near him. Alexander had his guitar with him. He set it next to a bench. They sat down. The guy began to ask what, how, where she studied, how long she had been living in this apartment, some common phrases. Do you sing? She asked him off key. Well, as you can see, he looked at the guitar. And now, she looked at him and immediately turned away because she was shy. Do you want me to sing to you? He asked her. If you want. She still didn't look up. Alexander took the guitar. He started to sing some song. And as it happens with all young lovers, all the words in the song Selena transferred to herself. And Alexander tried, pulling something about love, about unhappy love. Beautiful, Selena said when he finished. Do you want me to sing more? He asked her. I do, she answered honestly, and it was true. The guy started singing a song that said that he had been alone for so long, hadn't met the one and only one he would love yet. And then recently a girl appeared on the horizon. When he looked into her eyes, he realized that she was his in everything. And of course, Selena thought the guy in the song was Alexander and the girl was her. The girl just sat there and smiled. It was fall outside, with yellow leaves on the ground, and now here, late at night, in the park, where there was no one, these leaves, the bench, Alexander with a guitar, everything was so Poltigny. "Why are you so mysterious?" he asked. "No, I'm fine." She got even more embarrassed. Alexander moved closer, put his hand on her waist. At that moment, she turned around and he kissed her. Selena had kissed guys before, but never like he did now. "You're beautiful," he told her. "So are you," she told him, and then thought she must have said something stupid. "Do you want me to sing to you some more?" He realized that the girl was melting from his songs and from everything that was going on. "Aha," she nodded, and he sang again and again about love. "You're mine forever. I'll never leave you." Selena heard the words of the song, and then they were kissing again. "Should we go home?" she asked him when it was very late. The girl realized that her mother would scold her at home. "Let's go," he laughed. "Why are you laughing?" She didn't understand. Now anyone else would have offered to see her off, but realized that we live with you in adjacent apartments. And even if I didn't want to, I'd have to walk you out. He smiled again. "Yeah, funny, but..." She stopped talking. She wanted to say that if her mother saw them together, she probably wouldn't be happy, and then decided not to say it out loud. Alexander must have understood everything, because he didn't ask again. That evening they walked home. He held her hand. Everything was just as Selena had imagined she would someday have with a young man. They reached the driveway. He drew her to him, kissed her once more. "Will we meet up with you again?" he asked her. "Probably, but it still depends on you." She looked up at him. "Okay, I'll say it wrong then," he smiled. "Tomorrow you and I will meet here in the courtyard in the evening." He spoke so convincingly that the girl believed him. Good, and that was all the girl needed for her 15-year-old happiness. She walked into the house, took off her shoes, and her mom came out of the room. "Were you out with the neighbor?" she asked the girl. "Why do you think so?" Did not understand the daughter, how mom guessed. "Well, do I look like a fool? You came in and slammed the door at him," she mouthed. "And why can't we come from somewhere together, walk up the stairs, and go into our own apartment?" Selena didn't understand. "Oh, coincidences like that rarely happen," her mother told her, and went to her room. Selena didn't argue with her, went to her room. She lay down on the couch, hugged her favorite bear, and began to remember how tonight had gone. She realized that her parents would never let her date Alexander while she was in school. She had paid attention to him once when he was moving in, so that's why her mother was thinking about it now. Tonight, she didn't even go to wash her face. She fell asleep like that. She had to go to school in the morning, and she was getting ready in the evening. And even though the girls were calling to go out, Selena didn't go anywhere. She went out to the courtyard and sat at a table. Selena waited for Alexander, for he had told her yesterday that they would meet here in the evening. Time went by very slowly. It was 8:00 p.m., 9:00 p.m., and he was still gone. "Why are you sitting here?" She heard the voice of her mother, who came out of the entrance. "Nothing, just so I can't sit here." She was afraid that her mom would think something wrong. "Well, usually you and the girls go out somewhere, but today you settled right in the yard." Her mother suspected something again. "Hannah told us all to come over tonight, but she's staying late," she lied. "Okay." The mother looked at her one more time and went on her way. Alexander still hadn't come. "I see." She got up from the bench and headed for her entrance. She could have gone to where their company was meeting, but for some reason Selena didn't feel like it today, so she just walked home. She hadn't seen or heard from him for 3 days, and then when she got home from school, she saw him at the same table where she had waited for him a few days ago. "Selena, hi." He walked up to her. "Hi." She didn't want to show him she was offended or anything else she was thinking. "I'm sorry I didn't come over then." He took her hand. "Yeah, it's okay," she replied simply. "Shall we go for a walk?" he asked. Right now, she realized it's still another day. "If you don't want to, we can tonight." He looked into her eyes. "No, let's go right now," she agreed, because she thought if he said tonight, then he might not come again. And again they walked. Alexander said something, pressed her to him, kissed her, and Selena just melted from his embrace. "Come to me on Friday," he told her. "What's going to happen?" She wanted to know. "My friends and I will get together, sit. I'll introduce them to you," he began to tell her. Meanwhile, the girl was thinking about how she would leave her apartment and go into his. But that was not the most important thing, so she decided to think about it later. "What's on your mind?" he asked her. No, it was just that. Now she looked at him. For some reason, she felt like telling him about her mom not welcoming their connection at all. "But I can see that something is bothering you." He put his arm around her shoulders. "You know, the day you moved in, I saw you. I fell in love immediately," Selena began to say, and Alexander laughed. "That's your childish maximalism talking in you," he told her. "Well, let it be so. So when I saw you, then looked for a long time for meetings, my mother noticed all this, and now," she stopped. "And now she's telling you that I'm too old for you and you're still little and you can't come to me, right?" He took her face in his hands and kissed her. "Yes," she nodded, "but we'll figure something out." Alexander was sure of it. Of course, right now it seemed to the girl that she was willing to roll mountains for this man. At school, when she started to tell Hannah about her neighbor, she didn't even want to listen because it seemed that she didn't believe her friend. It turned out that she couldn't consult with her mom. Her friend didn't listen to her. She was on her own. On Friday, when she came from school, she hoped that her mother would not come until the evening, and her father never paid attention to where and when she went. But her mother did not live up to her expectations. "Okay, Mom, I'm off," she shouted from the hallway and left the apartment. Selena started downstairs, and with her back, she felt her mother's burning gaze through the peephole. The girl purposely tapped her heels louder so that she could hear that her daughter had definitely left the entrance. Downstairs, the girl slammed the door hard and sat down on the bench. She sat there for about 10 or 15 minutes, then very quietly opened the door, took off her heels, went up to her floor, and scratched at Alexander's door. "Ooh," he opened the door. "Quiet." She put her finger to her lips. "Ah, got it," he said in a whisper. Selena went in and just as quietly closed the door. Alexander led her into the room where her friends were already sitting around the table. He introduced her to everyone, and then they started drinking and eating. The guitar sounded many times that evening. Not only Alexander sang, his friends picked up. It was interesting and fun. Now it was necessary to go home, and so Selena also quietly went out as she came in, went down to the street, after immediately slamming the driveway door, and loudly went upstairs. "Have you been to the neighbor's house today?" her mother asked her from the doorstep. "Mom, are you awake?" was very surprising to the girl because it was not the first time she went out and came back late. But before, her mother did not suspect her of anything and certainly never met her in the middle of the night. "I'm waiting for you in the corridor," stood the woman with her arms at her sides and looked at her daughter. "Well, here I am." Celine stared at her point blank. "Give me your hand," her mother said to her. "Why?" She didn't understand. Her mother took her hand in her own while looking Selena in the eye. "Where have you been?" she asked her again. "Mom, what's wrong? Tell me." The girl was tired of standing there. "Your hands are warm, even if you were coming from Hannah or from where you were sitting. It's not the month of May outside. Your hands wouldn't be so warm," the woman told her. What kind of interrogation? What kind of innuendo? Maybe they were in my pockets. Selena didn't know what else to say. She didn't even think her mother would touch her hands or anything like that. "Daughter, he's much older than you. If you start dating him, he'll just ruin your life," she told her. "Mom, let me handle this. If I start dating him, you'll be the first to know," she told her and went to her room. She'll sort it out herself. Shook her mother's head and went to bed. The next day, when Selena was coming back from school, she saw Leslie on the bench at the entrance. "Hi," she walked up to her. "Hi," Hannah told her. This girl was also a few years older than Selena. She was friends with Tom, who lived in the same house as Selena's grandmother. "What are you doing here?" the girl asked her. "Living," Hannah looked up at her. "I live here too, but I've never seen you here before," Hannah laughed. "We just rented an apartment in this building yesterday. Tom and I are going to live here now," she told her. "Wow, you're welcome to visit," smiled Selena, and thought that nothing would be a problem for their meetings with Alexander now, because she could go to Leslie's and her mom would know it. In the evening, when they met, she told him everything. So I know Leslie and Tom too, he told her. So let's go visit them together then, Selena suggested, and they immediately went back to the entryway, up to the floor. Hannah was glad to have guests. Now every night they gathered there, it was fun. They didn't have to go anywhere. The whole group was here. But when her mother found out about hanging out with Leslie, she didn't approve. Where's Alexander? Selena came to see Leslie. I don't know. He hasn't come yet, she said. Selena was offended because he goes somewhere without her. She did not even suspect that the guy could be doing some other personal things of his own. And the one at this time with his friend dipped at the disco girls from the pedagogical school. Naturally, Selena couldn't know about it, and probably Hannah didn't even know about it. And when with Alexander they began to meet after a day after two, then the girl realized that he was still going somewhere. Even though Hannah supported her in everything, it still didn't help. Rightly said then Alexander that it was her maximalist love at 15. When winter was almost over, they sat at Leslie's as before. Alexander came in. Hello everyone. He walked into the room, saw Selena, smiled, immediately went to her, took her hands. Where have you been again? She asked him, although she realized that he had never offered anything, neither to meet nor to be friends, never confessed his feelings, but she still considered him hers. Where I was, there is no longer, he laughed, stood up, picked up the girl, began to kiss her. Alexander, you look kind of cheerful today, Selena said. Yes, he kissed her once more. Did something happen? She saw that this joy was all fake. Selena, I'm sorry, he kissed and kissed her. What for? Tell me already? She pushed him away from her. It was the first time she had ever done that. I'm getting married. I have a wedding in 2 weeks. He said those words and Selena felt like he slapped her. I don't get it. How are you getting married? She stood there in a complete stupor. That's when Hannah walked into the room. I did mishear, she asked. No, guys, I don't know how it happened, but Amy's pregnant. I can't leave her now. He didn't look Selena in the eye. Get off. She took his hands off her, then ran out of the apartment and went to her apartment. What's wrong with you? Saw her mother, how she felt when she came home. Don't talk to me, no one, went into her room and closed Celine. The tears flowed by themselves. There was such pain in her soul. She didn't know what to do, what to say, how to act. How could he do this to her? Because she had given herself to him completely, dissolved into him, and he just did not understand. Selena didn't go out all week. She didn't even go down to Leslie's to avoid meeting anyone. After the weekend, the neighbor came to see her on her own. Come on, we need to talk. She called her over to her place. The girl left the apartment, quietly went down to Leslie's place. They were sitting in the kitchen. Will you go? Asked Hannah to her. Where to? The neighbor didn't even smile. To the wedding. Where else? Hannah knew it hurt Selena to hear that, but she could not ask because Alexander had asked her to. And what am I going to be there as, a bridesmaid? Selena grinned sadly. Well, enough already. He's an adult. You're still a schoolgirl. How many you will have like him all? Do not be sad. Let him go. Let him get married and everything will be fine with him. And you too, persuaded her friend. And you know, I'll go, said Selena, because she had nothing to lose. And she would see this bride, who he had traded her for. The girl was not stupid. She really realized that at that age, she could not offer Alexander anything, and he apparently could not wait. That day, when there was a wedding, she tried strong alcohol for the first time, and then she danced, and then with her sister she went out for a walk somewhere. That day was like a blur. It was painful to watch a happy neighbor kissing some other girl. It was a year away from graduation. Alexander and Amy had gone somewhere. They just weren't in the apartment. At first, Selena felt bad. She was bored. She didn't go anywhere. She stopped talking to Leslie. Then Hannah and Tom moved out. The girl finished her studies, got her diploma, and went to another city to enroll. It had been a long time since Alexander had told her he had someone else. By the time she studied at the institute, the pain had somehow dulled. Everything was forgotten. Or maybe she had grown older and looked at many things differently. No one could explain that. Selena, are you always so sad? Asked her roommate in the dormitory. No, I'm normal, she answered. Yes, I see how normal you are. You spend all day in the room. It would be better to study, read something, notes rewrite. But that's just sitting there, doing nothing, said to her Betty. Why do nothing, I think, answered Selena. Ha ha, ha. That's an argument. That's the first time I've ever heard that. Her friend laughed at her. I don't see anything funny, turned away from her neighbor. Come on, stop being sad and thinking. Let's go for a walk, she called her. Oh, I'm so reluctant, Selena honestly admitted. Tell me, when was the last time you went out with guys, dated, went to a disco or something else? Sat down next to her Betty. When, never. At that moment, she remembered how with Alexander they went out, how he played guitar to her, sang songs. Well, Betty was waiting for her to act. And you know what? Okay, let's go, Selena agreed with her. That's another thing. Come on, get up. I'll show you that you can not only think, but also have a good time, immediately revived girlfriend. They went outside, went to the center of the city. It was very beautiful. There were benches. You could sit and meet with friends. Here they are. Now I'll introduce you, said Betty to Selene. A group of young people approached them, where there were both girls and guys. After introductions, they started talking to Selena as if they had known her forever. And among all of them, the girls singled one out. His name was Michael. He wasn't like the others. If everyone else wanted to drink, go for a walk, go to a disco or something else, this one was kind of pensive. He was always looking somewhere, not sitting with everyone else. But today Selena was too shy to approach him because she didn't know what to talk about and what to do. They returned home with the neighbor. She began to ask how and what, liked, did not like. Who is this Michael? Selena did not want to put this conversation in a long box. Wow, girlfriend, the first time she went out on the street, met the company, and immediately began to build bridges, Betty told her. Come on, I was just finding out. The girl was immediately embarrassed. Come on, say everything straight. I understand, smiled roommate. What can I say? I just liked the guy and wanted to know something about him, shrugged Selena. Well, I can't even tell you anything about him. He's always so quiet, though he gathers with us all the time, but he doesn't say much when he's talking. If everyone is dancing, he sits aside. They tell jokes, he laughs, but he never speaks. Began to remember Betty about Michael. I see. Selena stopped talking. Why don't you ask him yourself? Said her friend confidently. Maybe someday I'll get my act together and ask, felt the girl's cheeks flush. The next day, when they came in from their studies, they immediately started packing. Now it was only worth it to look at her roommate as she smiled and nodded at her, showing that she was ready to go again today. So are you going to talk to him today? Betty was curious. I don't know. I guess Selena wasn't a timid person, but after what happened to her in her relationship with Alexander, she had changed a bit. Today, all the guys were at the cafe when everyone was sitting around laughing about something. That's when Selena came up to Michael. Why aren't you laughing with everyone else? She asked. How about you? He turned to her. I don't know. She was confused by the question. She was expecting something else. Well, I'm kind of new in this company. I don't know much yet, she said. Well, I'm more of a listener than a talker. I'm interested in these guys, interested in watching what they do, how they do it, but I don't really want to take part in it, Michael told her and looked at her with his clear blue eyes. Selena could see that he was waiting for an answer or some other word from her, but she didn't know what to say, what to talk about. She couldn't think of anything to ask either. How about we get out of here? Michael suggested himself. Where should we go? The girl asked him. Yes, anywhere, he told her. Of course, I'm new to this city, but I know a place here. I discovered it recently. Come on, I'll show you, she smiled at him. Now Selena felt inside that something was changing in her. She really liked this guy. In all the time she had spent without Alexander, she had never looked at other young men. Let's go, he stood up. BT, we'll go for a walk with Michael. I hope no one will mind. She turned to her girlfriend, but looked at all the guys. Yeah, sure, come on. Her roommate winked at her and smiled. They left the cafe and headed in the direction where the private sector was. I even wonder where you're taking me, Michael said after a long silence. It is certainly not closed, but believe me, it is very beautiful there. She said so because she could not explain where she was taking the young man. They had practically reached the exit from the city. There was a big bridge there. Selena asked him to help her, and she started to go down. Michael gave her a hand, helped her, and then went down himself. Now they were under the bridge. There was a ledge to sit on, and as they did so, Selena took the boy by the chin and turned his head to the side. "Look," she said. There was a river with a swift current, with large rocks piled along the edges, and a young forest framing the river. "Yes, you're right. It's really beautiful here," he told her. "Brr," she shivered. "Are you cold?" He turned to her. "Yes, I didn't think it would be chilly here, but apparently from the river," she wrapped her arms around herself. "Come here," he moved closer. Celine didn't resist. The young man put his arms around her and pulled his jacket over her back. "Thank you." She lifted her head and looked up at him. "You smell so good," Michael suddenly told her. "What?" She laughed. "It's true," he answered her. "You're really different. No one has ever said such a compliment to me before," she giggled. From there they sat in silence, watching the water flow. When a few hours had passed, the girl stood up. "Hello," he came up and said to her. "Hello." Everything inside her shook again. Her hands trembled, just like her voice. The girl could not pull herself together. "How are you?" Alexander asked her. "You and I haven't seen each other for so many years, and besides the banal 'how are you,' you didn't know what to ask me." She finally managed to answer. "Selena, I'm sorry." He looked at her and she could see that his feeling hadn't gone anywhere either. "No way." She stepped around him and wanted to walk away, but he wouldn't let her. "Wait, let's go somewhere and talk," he suggested to her. "Alexander, please don't start." She really didn't want this. No, she really wanted it, but that would mean betraying her Michael. "We'll go. Everything will be fine. I promise you." He pulled her with him. The girl closed her eyes. She knew she was doing the wrong thing, but she couldn't help it. They walked to a small cafe. Alexander was saying something. She was smiling. Selena just sat and looked at the man she cared so much about. "Why aren't you saying anything?" he asked her. "I don't know what to say to you. I realize that you deceived me, betrayed me, but I can't help it. I just want to be near you." Now she wasn't as embarrassed as before. "Okay, come here." He held out his hand to her. Selena stood up, walking over to him. He sat her on his lap and started kissing her neck, her hair. She closed her eyes and just gave into those feelings. "Why does it have to be like this every time?" She spoke softly. "Shall we go to my place?" he whispered to her. "Do you live there too?" she asked him. "Yep," he said back to her. "What about your wife?" This question was not just because she was worried that Amy might see them, but in general, whether she was there now or not. "We divorced." He looked into the girl's eyes. Good, she didn't bother asking him why, about what, because she realized that if he wanted to, he would tell her. Now, when they came to the entrance where they both lived, Selena smiled. She took off her shoes, as in childhood, and quietly began to climb the stairs. Alexander carried her bag, followed, and smiled. They entered the apartment, whispered for a long time, then started kissing. When Selena woke up in his bed in the morning, she had no regrets. "Are you going to stay?" Alexander asked her. "No, actually, I didn't want to tell you about it yesterday. I'm getting married." She said those words and smiled. "I don't see anything funny," he told her. "I just remembered how you once said those words to me just like that." She kissed him. "And the fact that you are now cheating on your fiancé, is that normal?" Alexander asked her. "Yes, I realize that I am doing wrong, but I couldn't stop myself," she said, got up and started to dress. "Will I see you again?" He sat up in bed. "I can't answer that question for you," she told him, took her bag and shoes in her hands, quietly left the apartment, went down to the floor. There she put on her heels and started to climb back up. Selena knocked on the door. Her mother opened it immediately. "Hi," cheered both of them as Selena hugged the woman. The mother only hummed and looked at her. "What?" her daughter asked her. "Nothing, hands are warm." After that they talked a lot and for a long time, and closer to the weekend together went to where Michael and Selena lived. Everything went well. The girl did not even remember about her cheating. Yes, and it was hard to call it cheating. In fact, it was, but not to her liking. She loved this man and wanted to always be with him. And maybe now that her dream had come true, she would forget him forever. But that's just what she thought to herself. 3 years passed. Things were going very well in her and Michael's relationship. Her husband was already working. Now Selena was getting a job too. When she had worked almost a year, she was entitled to a vacation. Then, Oma, I'm going. She looked at her husband. Yes, of course. Where do you want to go? He was interested. First of all, I'll visit my mom, and then we'll see. She almost never hid anything from him. Great. It was warm between them now, as it always was. And so Selena was walking up her entryway again. She glanced at Alexander's door, stepping through her own. Her parents were happy to see her arrive. And when the next day she wanted to meet her friends, she went out into the yard, and again she saw him. And again she couldn't pass by. She stopped. Today, no one asked how and who was doing. They just hugged and started kissing. So funny, said the girl, when they were already at Alexander's apartment. What's so funny? He didn't understand. I did not know. We meet once every 5 years, she exaggerated. My beautiful. He removed the bangs from her eyes. Alexander, don't please, she asked him, knowing that again she would do nothing to make them break up and never meet again. How are you here now? I came on vacation, decided first to see my mother, and then already rushed somewhere further. She was pleased to lie next to him. And let's go together, suggested to her Alexander. I don't mind. She turned to him and kissed him. Mom, as usual, didn't know anything. Selena told her she was going alone. She took her suitcase and went to the train station. Alexander was already waiting for her there. They spent the whole vacation together. They both came back, realizing that she was about to go home. Can't you stay? He asked her. No, she didn't lie to him because she didn't want to hurt Michael. On the last night, Alexander had kissed her so much that Selena was ready to change her mind, but she mustered up all her willpower and left. She arrived home and Michael greeted her with flowers. He always did that because he was a very attentive and caring husband. She was a little embarrassed in front of him, but she smiled. Life went on. Almost a year passed, and when Selena was once again going on vacation, she decided that if she met Alexander, she would definitely tell everything to Michael, and they would divorce. And so, when the bags were already packed and she was ready to go out, she suddenly felt sick. What's wrong? Michael came running up to her. I don't know, maybe my blood pressure dropped, and I was dizzy and nauseous. Don't you think? Michael stopped talking and smiled. You mean the pregnancy? Selena guessed. Yeah, he nodded affirmatively. But it was easy to check. They'd been waiting for this moment for a long time, and now, when she was about to leave, it had come. When it was confirmed, of course, she decided to stay with her husband, called her mom, told her the good news. After that, it was a hard time. All year long, she was nauseous, her blood pressure was high, her legs were swollen. Selena just couldn't wait until it was time to burst into tears. And then it happened. Their firstborn son was born and they named him Mark. Selena had always felt like a young girl who could do anything, but when the baby came into the world, the time somehow quickly ran away. Here she was sitting with him in the maternity leave, and now it's time for him to go to kindergarten. Now there were already other worries, some crafts, applications, everything else. Michael had been around all this time, but they were like neighbors. Michael, should we split up like you did? Selena asked him in the kitchen. I don't know. If you want to, let's get a divorce. He was apathetic as always. Why are you like this? She sat down on the chair next to him. Like what? He didn't look at her. Oh, okay, she got up, went to her room. So life went on, and when Mark was in 4th grade, Selena, after all, made up her mind and filed for divorce. The apartment was Michael's parents', so there was nothing to divide. She packed some things, and together with her son, they went to Selena's hometown. Do not regret that so many years have passed, her mother asked her. What's there to regret? I'm like in a cage. Here is a child with whom I need to constantly study, something to do, on the other hand. Pharmacy husband, who always does not care what I say. He will do. Selena was nervous. Don't be so hard on yourself, her mother told her. Say, Mom, are any of the girls left in town? She asked her. You know, I think Hannah's here. The woman remembered something. Do you think they still have a home phone or not anymore? Smiled Selena. You dial it? Check. She's been living with her grandmother lately. Maybe she still has one. Her mother shrugged. Selena dialed her school friend's home number. and after a couple of beeps she heard her. "Hannah, hi," she said cheerfully. "Selena, it can't be how many years it's been." Couldn't believe it. They arranged to meet, and that evening they spent a lot of fun. Almost all night Selena told Hannah what they had had over the years. They saw that they had changed a lot. They both had children, a divorce under their belt. "Well, you go ahead, don't get lost," Hannah told her. "Yeah, now, I guess I won't get lost, as long as I've come here to live here," Celine told her. The time was practically 5 in the morning when she went outside and walked home. And when she walked into the courtyard, she just laughed. There at the table sat none other than Alexander. "This just can't be." She walked towards him. "Selena, how are you here at this hour?" He looked up at her. "I left my husband, I came to my mother, and you?" Now she was no longer shy, sat down next to him and took his hand. "I'm sick of everything at home. I went out for some fresh air." He sighed and smiled, but it turned out to be sad. "At 5 in the morning?" She shook her head. "Aha, you left for me? I had nothing left. Met with one, a little lived together, then decided to get married. And now I still regret that I went to this step," said calmly Alexander. "I see, and I wanted to live with my mother. But now I realize that I'll probably rent an apartment," Selena said slowly. They exchanged phone numbers, hugged, entered the entrance together, went upstairs. "Bye," he looked into her eyes. "Bye." She walked into the house. Inside her, it was like butterflies were fluttering. "What's the matter with you? Did you meet the neighbor again?" Saw her mother. What a state she was in. "That's it, Mom, enough. It's been so long. It's boring." She went into her room where her son was sleeping, lay down next to him. The next day, as she wanted, Selena really rented an apartment and in the evening called Alexandra. "If you want to come, I'll give you the address now," she told him. "I'm on my way," he answered and hung up. Selena told her mom that she wouldn't take the baby with her because she wanted to do some repairs. She herself just wanted to meet Alexander. He arrived. They briefly sat at the table, drank a little wine, and then they were together again in bed. He hugged her, kissed her, stroked her hair. She touched his stubble, remembering how good they had been together. "Funny," she said. "Funny to you again. What is it this time?" Alexander asked her. "How many years you and I have been together? A lot, but really not at all," she replied. "No, it's only physically we are not together, but for real?" He looked expectantly. "Well, 15 years for sure," she counted in her head. Selena raised up on her elbow. "Can you imagine? So many years we love each other, and there's no way we can be together." Alexander lay on his back and sighed. "Maybe it's not fate." Selena kissed him. "I don't know the answer to that question." He squeezed his eyes shut, sighed, hugged her, realizing that in the morning he would still have to go back to his wife. "We can't be together now either, can we?" She looked at him. "You see, Selena, yes, my wife is giving me a hard time, but I can't hurt her, at least not yet. I need time," he told her. Okay, I don't demand anything from you," she smiled. Now that Mark was being sent to his grandmother's house for the weekend, Selena and Alexander were seeing each other again, and there were already conscious meetings between two adults. "What have you been doing for a week?" Alexander asked her. "Nothing, back and forth, getting a job," she said quickly. "Did not meet anyone?" Asked another question. "Why are you talking like that?" Selena didn't understand. "You know how jealous I am of you." He kissed her without stopping. Himself, then with his wife, does not want to offend her, but I am jealous, and I do not am, and others will not give. Did not understand his girlfriend. All right, calm down," he pulled her to him. When Selena got a job, perhaps it was Alexander's fault, who was always talking about it, or maybe she wanted it herself. But that's where she met Paul. He worked as a security guard, and he was such a simple guy. You could talk to him about anything, and her mom liked him. Mark began to treat him normally. "Alexander, I'm getting married," Selena told him once when we met. "I don't get it." He looked at her, realizing that she had never once told him about any other men or meeting them. "I'm sorry, but if you want, we can keep seeing each other," she said. Alexander quickly got up, got dressed and left without saying a word. Selena realized that she had hurt him, but it wasn't good to live alone either. After the wedding, Paul suggested that Selena go to the north to try to make some money there. She didn't mind because she needed the distraction. Her mom talked her into leaving Mark here, not picking him up from school. That was the deal. Leaving Mark here, not picking him up from school. That was the deal. Strange as it may seem, the young couple settled down quickly after arriving in the north. They found a job, got good money, and somehow Paul began to drift away from his wife. Here he drank once, here is the second, came home drunk, began to complain about how hard his life. When Selena said the same thing, he only nodded his head, not believing her. Family life lasted only 3 years. During that time, Selena only went home once on vacation to see her son. The rest of the time, they'd only talked on the phone. And now she was standing on the doorstep with a bag, looking at Paul, and could not believe that from a handsome, cheerful, cool guy he had turned into a sullen man who was always dissatisfied with something. When she came back to her hometown, she applied to the bank, took a mortgage. The money for the first installment was enough. Now she had her own apartment, where she and Mark moved. Everything was good. Selena began to make repairs. Her mother often came to visit them. Then they came to her, and the repairs were progressing. Now as Selena wanted to go on vacation, which happened twice in a year, she took her mother there, and strangely enough, they were very good together. "And why did your life turn out this way?" the woman asked her. "Mom, do not start. Did not want to talk about it, daughter. I'm not starting. Everything is still ahead of you. You're only..." She didn't have time to finish. Selena interrupted her. "Let's not talk about age right now," she asked her. "Okay," the woman agreed. Life went on as usual. And then the mother got a trip to a sanatorium for 2. She went to Selena. "Oh, no. I'm not going with you." She immediately waved her hands. "I see." The woman knew there would be nothing for her to do at the sanatorium. "Then I'll take Mark with me." "That's fine. Go, you rest there, and I'll rest from you," laughed Selena. Grandmother and grandson packed their bags. They left. Selena had only been home alone for 2 days. She just enjoyed this loneliness because there was someone in her life all the time. And so she decided to go to the store, where the very fateful meeting took place. When Alexander said hello to her, Selena went about her usual business. She went to work, met with friends. On her day off, she decided to go to her mother's apartment to help her with the kitchen renovations while she was away. Hi, she passed by her father's room and immediately began to prepare the room for wallpapering. "Are you going to be here alone?" The man didn't understand. "Why not?" she wondered. "Okay," the father waved his hand. He was not in the life of this family at all. When everything was finished, Selena went home. It was a day off, 7 o'clock in the evening. She thought it would be good to meet Hannah. The girl took her phone out of her pocket, went into the entryway, but she didn't have time to dial the number. Alexander was sitting on the windowsill in the entryway. "What are you doing here?" Selena was surprised. "I'm waiting for you." He was not embarrassed at all. "Ah." She stretched out, passed by, came up, opened the door, and waited for him to come in, so as not to find out all this on the stairwell. "Are you offended?" He crossed the threshold. "No," she replied wryly. "I see." Alexander realized that he was guilty before Selena. "Will you have tea?" The hostess realized that today she would not be able to go anywhere. "Yes." He sat down on a chair and looked at her. "Well, tell me, why did you come?" She turned her back to the stove, doing something there so as not to see Alexander. "I couldn't." He didn't explain anything. "I see. If now I cannot." She could not help but take offense at him. "Honey, I had so much work to do." He approached her, and now he had no doubt that she would not resist. "Alexander," she pressed her back to him. "I took a few days off." He spoke directly into her ear. "So." Selena turned to him. "Spend that time together." He turned off the stove and pulled her into the room. "Wait." She couldn't keep up with him. And again the gentle embrace, the hot kisses, everything the girl liked so much. She lay on his arm and thought of different things. "What do you think?" He was lying on his back. "Why do you think I'm thinking about something right now?" She smiled at such a tautology. "Silence means you're thinking. A man can't do otherwise." He turned a little towards her. "What can I think about? Only you." She smiled and kissed his shoulder. "And what is there in your thoughts?" Alexandra wondered. Nothing. I think that I should have waited so many years to lie with you like this now. She turned on her stomach. Selena, I love you so much, he stroked her. I love you. She was having a ball. They lay there, cuddling. They didn't want to get up at all. They fell asleep. In the morning, the girl woke up first. She wanted to surprise her guests with something. She went to the kitchen, started the dough for pancakes, and began cooking. At the same time, she had a kettle boiling. Selena made fragrant coffee, rolled the pancakes beautifully, arranged everything on a plate. She took a small creamer, filled it with jam, which her mother brewed. Wake up, darling, she brought everything to his bed. Good morning. He opened his eyes. Look what I made for you. She put a plate on the nightstand. What a delicious smell, Alexander stretched. He started to eat his breakfast, at the same moment giving a bite to Selena as well. They were acting like teenagers, though it wasn't like that at all. What are we going to do today? She asked and smiled. Probably for the first time in her life, she was so happy around a man. I don't know, suggested. He looked at her with loving eyes. Let's go to the park where we used to walk, she suggested and asked at the same time. I don't even know. He was somehow embarrassed. Why? She pouted her lips, pretending to be offended. And let's order something and lie around all day. He said his version of leisure time. I have great movies. She wanted to watch them for a long time, but somehow she didn't have time. See, you wanted to go to the park. He hugged her again. They couldn't get enough of each other. They couldn't let each other out of their embrace. So they lay like Alexander suggested. They didn't even make the bed. That's it, enough chilling. Selena said the next morning she had to go to work. Do you mind if I stay here? He asked her. Of course not, she was going to. I'll be there soon. She kissed her lover and left. Everyone who saw the girl now realized that she had something wrong, because she only did not glow with happiness. Are you in love, friend? A co-worker came up to her. You know, I don't want to tell anything yet, somehow later. So as not to jinx it, Selena was afraid that Alexander could leave again and never come back. Okay, I see that you're doing well. I will not interfere, withdrew from her. Somehow the girl finished the day. Home did not go and flew. Now Selena did not care who would think about her, how she behaved. The girl went to the store, bought everything for dinner, went to the house, and another fabulous evening took place. I feel so good with you. The man pressed her against him. Even though Selena realized that she had accepted him once again, and he might think it would always be like this. If he did something or made a mess of things, she would still forgive him and take him back. But she couldn't help it. So many years without a normal relationship had taken its toll. Would you give birth to me? Suddenly asked Alexander. Do not understand? She stopped the course of her thoughts because they were interrupted by his strange question. And what is not clear, he turned to her. What gave birth? I'm not at that age anymore, she giggled. You see, after my daughter died, I want children so much, but I cannot get, Alexander admitted. Of course, I understand everything, but the girl stopped talking. On the one hand, she wanted to please her lover, and on the other hand, she did not know if she needed another child. Okay, let's go. He leaned back on the pillow. I need to think. Selena found something to say. Okay. They turned on the next episode of the movie and began to watch, each thinking about his own. Alexander's weekend ended quickly, and he had to go to work again. And as Selena worked in an ordinary organization, went there in the morning and came in the evening, then Alexander worked for himself, and his working day was not rationed. When should I expect you? She asked. I don't know. I hope to be back by evening, he told her, kissed her and left. Okay, bye. She was afraid to let him go. But love did not deceive. Now every day, even if not at 5, but by evening still returned. I've made dinner. A happy Selena greeted him. Great. I'm hungry as a wolf, he said and went to wash his hands. During the time that Mom and Mark were in the sanatorium here, Selena has practically formed a family. I've made up my mind, Selena told Alexander one evening. To do what? He turned to her. To get pregnant. She looked at him and smiled again. Thank you. He kissed her. You what? It still needs to be done. She had so many unspent feelings that Selena was ready to do anything for this man. Yes, I think there will be a problem with that. You'll have to go to the clinic, Alexander told her. What? Why? She didn't understand. It so happens that I have problems, so it is necessary to do everything artificially. He looked her trustingly in the eyes. It's very expensive. Selena knew how much IVF costs. I have a classmate who works there. He will help me do everything, the man assured her. Okay, Selena snickered. She didn't think it would turn out like this. Now we have to go there, go through all the procedures, and then talk about the main thing. He kissed her. After that, Alexander wasn't home for a couple days. He called saying he had work, so he was delayed. Selena had nothing against it. She thought that since they were already talking about such serious topics, he would not deceive her. Hi, sorry it's been so long, he came to her. It's okay, she was thinking about the trip to the clinic. Will you be able to take a vacation at work? Alexander asked her. Yes, of course, she doubted, but there was nothing to worry about yet. That's great. I'll then also tell the employees that I'll be gone for a while. He seemed happy. When everything was decided, they packed up and drove to the neighboring town where the clinic they needed was located. Isn't it dangerous? Selena asked Alexander. I do not know. The doctor will tell everything. He smiled. Let's agree on something with you. She didn't look at him. Okay, about what? Talk. He was ready for all conditions. If at the first time will not work, then we will not try again. She said all this somehow sad. Whatever you say, love. He kissed the top of her head. When they were at the hospital, Selena was taken somewhere, going through all the procedures she was told. Hi, Jacob. Alexander met his friend in the hallway. Hello. They went to his office. Is everything ready? The man looked at him. Yes, the man shook his head. Well, why are you reacting like that? Clapped his comrade on his shoulder. Do you realize what I'm doing? Raised the doctor's eyes at him. Come on, she's young. Everything will be fine, Alexander said cheerfully. That's it. We're waiting for your Selena, said the man, and started studying her papers. It was done. Alexander was staying with Jacob while Selena was at the clinic. She was perfectly healthy. They could proceed with the surgery. Together with Alexander, they signed all the paperwork. It seemed all they had to do now was wait. Alexander, are you sure? His friend asked him. Of course, there was not a single thought in his mind that he doubted anything. Just a few more days then, and everything will be ready, Jacob told him. That's fine. He went to the hospital to support Selena. When everything was done, they drove home together. The girl had gotten all the recommendations from the doctors, so now all they had to do was follow everything. Come on, let's not say anything to anyone yet, Alexander told her quietly and hugged her. Good. She was also afraid that something might not work out. I'll have to leave for work now. The man looked at his companion. Good, well, I'll go to my mom's. They've been here for a while, said resting. Selena didn't understand how she felt right now. That's fine. See you later. He kissed her, walked her to her mother's house, and then went about his business. Selena walked up the steps. There were so many thoughts in her head that she thought she would go crazy if she thought about it all. In the end, the girl decided not to tell her mom anything for now. How it was going to be would be the way it would be. Hi, she entered the apartment, first hugging her son and then already her mom. Where have you been so long? Looked at her woman. I became ill. I decided to take a long vacation and went to the clinic, a little to tidy up my health. And what are you in pain? The woman got worried. Nothing in particular, but it wouldn't hurt to get better. Selena lied flat out. Don't upset me like that. Her mother hugged her again. They sat and talked. Mark told how he and his grandmother had spent time in the sanatorium. And Selena had one thing on her mind, that now she was expecting a child from Alexander. Daughter, I can see that something is bothering you. When Mark went into the room, the mother decided to talk to the girl. Mom, I can't tell you anything yet, because I don't know anything myself. Selena looked her in the eyes, so she believed her. And it wasn't untrue. The girl really wasn't sure about Alexander, about his attitude towards her, because he had betrayed her so many times. Okay, I won't pester you. When you think it's necessary, you'll tell me, kissed her daughter on the cheek. Thank you. Selena went home because she hoped that Alexander would come to her. And he came, which couldn't help but make her happy. What's with the mood? He asked from the threshold. I don't know, probably hormones. She came over and pressed herself against him. It's going to be okay, he hugged her, and now Selena felt as if he would never leave her side because of the pregnancy. I know, they stood like that in the hallway. The next day he went to work. Selena has to work too, but the condition was such that she just couldn't do anything. "Hello," she called her boss. "I'll stay home today. I feel really bad." She understood that she had just finished her vacation, but she couldn't do anything in that condition either. She stayed home. She stayed in bed practically the whole day. At some point, she had to call the doctor to ask why things were like this and what to do. "Selena, is everything all right?" Alexander called her back immediately. "Yes, how did you know?" She was surprised. "You forgot that Jacob is my friend. He was on his way to see her." "Right," she remembered. "I'll be there in a minute." He stopped talking to her. "Okay," the girl said simply already. Alexander arrived. He was so caring, doing everything for his girl. She immediately felt better as she snuggled up to him, fell asleep. From then on, Alexander was home or just around her as often and as long as possible. It was pleasing. One evening they were sitting at home. Selena was stirring sugar in a mug. "Alexander, are we going to live like this?" She asked him without raising her eyes. "Don't you get it?" He got nervous. "What is not clear here? I want to be your wife." She did not hide anything. "Let's wait until the baby is born, and then we will celebrate." He took her hand, pulled her, and pressed her to him. "Okay," she always agreed with him. When a few months passed, Mark noticed that his mother had gotten better. Now it was impossible to hide from anyone that she was expecting a child. "Honey, when did you want to tell me about this?" Her mom came to visit her. Selena became nervous that at any moment Alexander could come, and she did not want her and her mom to meet. "And let's go to your place, we'll talk, or just take a walk." The girl began to dress. Good was not against the mother. They went outside, walked, talked, but Selena never said anything to her mother. "Yes, I'm expecting a baby, but I haven't said anything to anyone yet," the daughter told cryptically. "Well, I don't recognize you lately." She wanted to hug Selena, but she pulled away a little. "What are you doing?" Her mom didn't understand. "I've been sick of the smell of perfume lately," she smiled. "Are you coming home or to our place?" Her mother asked because Mark was at her place. "I'm going home," turned around and walked Selena. "Okay, bye," the woman said in her back, realizing that not everything is easy in her daughter's life. Alexander could show up today and then be gone for 2 days. Some moments Selena just wondered why she had agreed to all of this. She would be alone now. How good it is when you don't think about anything, don't suffer about anyone. But no, she had to meet him again. Pregnancy had taken its toll. All Selena did now was cry and wait. "Where have you been?" She met Alexander once again with a red-eyed girl. "My darling," he began his song. "You know how I'm alone here. I can't tell my mom yet." She was crying again. "That's it. Calm down," he told her. They spent many days together, but except for compliments and hugs, Alexander gave nothing to the girl. Here, everything necessary, he brought her from the pharmacy medicines. "Thank you, but I need you." "Not all this," she showed her purchases. "Understand, I work. We need something to live on." He kissed and hugged her again. Toward nightfall, he left again. What the hell is this? Could not get out of her depression, girl. The next day, she called a friend with whom she worked together. "Hi, can you come over?" she asked her. "Yeah, what's wrong?" She got curious. "Come, I'll tell you everything." Selena finally decided. Her friend was at her place in the evening. They sat in the room. The girl was shocked to see Selena's belly. "So you'll be on maternity leave soon," she said. "Yeah, no one at work knows yet. I'm hiding it as best I can," she said. "Yes, friend, and I thought you were on a roll," smiled the colleague. I do not know why I went to all this," cried Selena, and then told her friend what and how she had happened. "What's wrong with you?" She couldn't believe her ears. "Here, imagine what women are stupid." Selena continued to cry. "And who is this Alexander of yours?" she asked. Here, the girl showed her a photo in her phone. "You what? I know him," made Big Eye's friend. "Well, a lot of people know him." Selena calmed down a bit. "And I know of his wife," the girl said. "I don't get it." "What wife? He's not married." It was Selena's turn to be surprised. "How come?" "She works in a kindergarten," said the colleague. "No way," cried the girl even more. At that moment the doors opened. Alexander appeared in the apartment. Hi, Alexander. Stood up the guest to leave the apartment. By doing so, she let him know that she knew him. Hello. He turned pale, walked into the room. Stop crying. You could hurt the baby, he told Selena. Why did you do all this? She didn't understand. I love you. He wanted to approach her. Until you get divorced, don't even think about it. She put her hands out in front of her. What are you listening to her? It's not enough what gossip is going around the city. Alexander tried to justify himself. What do you want to tell me that she just deceived me? Why should she? Cried, and could not understand how Alexander could do that to her. She thought that since they had been together since childhood, he loved her with a sincere love. How many times he had asked her to forgive him, and how could she believe it all? And why would she have a baby now if he wasn't around? How to tell her mother about all this? Many thoughts were in the girl's mind. Selena, he approached her. No, I told you. Until you go see your wife, you can't even come near my house, she told him. What am I supposed to tell her? Alexander started talking to her differently. How is that what? Tell her the whole truth, that you have a woman, that she is expecting a child from you, and most importantly, divorce. Through sobs she spoke. Selena. He looked at her and didn't say anything else. What? She wasn't ready to back down anywhere right now. Okay, come on by. I'll be right there. He walked out the apartment door. Selena stood in the hallway, only hearing the door of the entryway slam. She dialed her mom's number. Yes, daughter. Why are you so late? She was surprised. Mom? I need to talk to you. Finally got up the courage to tell her mother. Okay, come. She got excited because it was not often that her daughter shared with her. When Selena came and told all this to her mother, she found nothing better than to advise her to get acquainted with Alexander's wife herself. And what? How do you imagine it? I just come to her. So what? Selena was curious and incomprehensible. It had never happened in her life. Well, how is that what? First of all, your stomach goes to your forehead. And secondly, you have been in love and know each other for so long. The mother was in shock at what her daughter is doing. Although not a little girl, there is a head on her shoulders. Why, maybe listen to you and really go? At this point, Selena even smiled because she imagined the eyes of a woman who just like her trusted Alexander. Go and talk. And suddenly he really is nothing. This man, and you cry because of him. You'll have a baby. We'll raise it. We'll grow up. You're not as old as you say. Mom came over and hugged Selena. Thank you for your support, she told her. She hadn't slept half the night tonight because she was thinking about how and what she would say to the one her loved one was living with. At the same moment, she grinned. No matter how many wrongs he had brought her, she still thought about him, even in her head, that he was her favorite. But that wasn't important right now. It was important was different. The next day, from the very morning, Selena did not put off an alarm box, got dressed and went exactly to the kindergarten where Alice's wife Alexander worked. Naturally, neither to him nor to anyone else she said anything. Hello, Selena entered the kindergarten. When asked who she wanted, she said, but we can't call her now. The workday has already started. She's with the children. Some woman spoke to her. Okay, I'll go to the group then. Celine had nothing to lose. The one she was talking to now rushed after her. At the noise, other teachers ran out. Also the music teacher, the speech therapist came too. And when Selena entered the group where Alice works, there were already quite a few adults there. Hello, Alice, a pregnant girl said to her. She unbuttoned her coat on purpose so that her big belly could be seen better. Hello, Selena, she replied, and her colleagues tensed up. And what, you think he'll stay with you? We've been together for so long. I'm expecting a child from him. Soon it will be born. Selena began to tell her directly into her eyes. My dear, you are such a fool, grinned Alice. At this moment, all the colleagues were shocked that the wife did not react in any way to the fact that her husband had a mistress. Why did I become a fool? The girl did not understand anything. She looked at those present with confusion. Don't you know whose child it is? Alice asked a strange question. Of course I know mine, answered her interlocutor. Everyone else stood there silent and just shocked at what they were hearing here now. No, it's my child, mine and Alexandra's. We've been looking for a surrogate mother for a long time, but it's expensive, and no one agreed in our city. And then you came along. Alexander offered me a plan. I didn't refuse. The embryo was being prepared, so they planted it in you. Alice explained to her. What are you talking about? I signed all the documents for IVF. Selena shouted loudly. No, you signed the papers that you agreed to become a surrogate mother. Naturally, we'll pay you the money, but you have to give up the baby. Alice was as calm as a boa constrictor, which made everyone around her terrified. I won't give it to you. It's my baby. Selena screamed at her. They tried to calm her down, but she was already in such a state that she couldn't see anyone or anything. She ran down the stairs and out into the street. She needed to get home right away because anything could happen to her in this state. How could all this have happened? And in fact, if it was true, it could be called betrayal more than betrayal. How could you do this to me? She called Alexandra on the way. Selena, tell me exactly what happened. He heard that she is in a very bad condition. What's going on, and you're asking me that? She shouted all over the street. Naturally, in such a condition did not have to wait for anything good. Selena was put in the hospital. In the evening she became ill. An ambulance was called. She was taken away. Alexander came as soon as he heard. Come here. She looked at him like a wolf at his prey. Beloved, believe me, I do not love her. I have always loved you. Everything she told you is not true. We did honestly, Alexander said and begged her. Man, you're only making things worse. She can't worry, it will be bad, the nurse told him. I will come tomorrow, and before that I will write. He sent the girl an air kiss. She lay on the bed, looking at the ceiling, and did not understand who then in life can be trusted. After this moment, it was not clear what to do at all. Selena decided to tell everything to her mom. Even though she didn't want to at first, she dialed her number, and even though it was very late, the woman came. Wow, her mom listened to her. Can you imagine how this could have happened? Selena cried. And I told you years ago that he would ruin your life, cried the mother along with her daughter. Don't. Now Selena tried to calm her down. At that moment there was a prickling at the bottom of her stomach. Ouch. Grabbed the girl for him. What? Did not understand the woman. I do not know, raised her eyes full of horror at her mother. Then she got up and ran into the corridor, called the doctor. Everyone immediately fussed, ran. The woman was put out into the corridor. Call Alexander. She heard her daughter ask her to do so. Alexander, hello, this is Selena's mom. She dialed his number from her phone. Did something happen? I was at her place a few hours ago, he asked tiredly. Yes, she's in labor. Nothing, the woman softened or hid. On my way, he said and passed out. Things were not easy for Selena. She was screaming loudly. The mother was left in the corridor only to worry. Alexander promised but never arrived. It had been hours, but he still hadn't been there. The mother kept dialing his number again and again, but no one answered. Some more time passed. The girl came out of the room, looked at the woman. Are you the mother? She asked. Yes, she nodded and walked over. You have a girl, 3,952 centimeters. Congratulations, she said, smiling. The granddaughter's new grandmother sat down on the couch that stood there. Thank you, she cried. It's okay. You will soon be able to see mom and baby, the nurse reassured. For some reason, time dragged very slowly, but finally, they are all together in the ward. The baby is lying in a separate crib. How are you? Mom asked her daughter. Everything is fine, and why Alexander is not there? You did not call him. Selena asked first of all. Called, he said he was on his way, but he is still not, said all that was mother. Well, it's in his repertoire, smiled the corners of her lips girl. Why don't you call them yourself? Mom handed her the phone. Come on, she took the device, dialed the number. Hello, she heard a man's voice. Selena pressed hang up. She looked at her mom. What are you doing? She saw confusion or fear in her eyes. It's not Alexander, she said. Who is? No one answered me at all? The woman was surprised. At that moment, the phone rang again. On the screen was Alexander's number. I'm listening, Selena answered. You just called, she heard. Who is this man to you? A new question. He is the father of my child, Selena said calmly. She tried not to be nervous. Together with his wife, they were in an accident. They are being taken to the hospital now. She learned about what happened. What do I have to do? Selena got worried. I just informed you about it. You can take care of it yourself, she beeped. And what? Waited for her mother to know what Selena had learned, because her eyes were getting bigger and bigger during the conversation. And then she started to cry. Alexander is in the hospital, and together with his Alice, cried Selena even harder. At that moment the baby cried. It needed to be fed. So the woman left the room again. She decided to go to where Alexander had been brought and talk to him. Since she decided, she started to do it. The woman called a cab, reached the hospital. What she learned there made her change her plans a bit. Hello, a husband and wife who had been in an accident were recently admitted here. The visitor spoke quickly. Yes, but I want to upset you. While the ambulance was on its way to the hospital, the woman passed away and the man is in a coma, the doctor told her. I see, thank you. She went home, didn't know whether to tell her daughter or not. She decided that when she was discharged, she would tell her. Every day Grandma and Mark visited Selena, everything was fine, so they were discharged within a week. Everyone was happy. I'm wondering why Alexander isn't in touch. What's up with them? I need to call, Selena told her mother. Selena, I have something to tell you. Lowered her mother's eyes and spoke out what she had learned that day at the hospital. Mammy, can you stay with Sophia? I need to go to him. She looked at him with a pleading look. But let's hurry up. The child will soon be hungry. She realized that it was useless to do anything. Thank you, my dear, kissed her daughter and ran. She entered his room. He was lying with a broken leg, and something was with his hands. Hello, she said quietly at him and smiled. Hello, he looked only with his eyes. He couldn't even turn his head. You've had a daughter? Congratulations. She leaned over and kissed him. What did you name her? Alexandra had already been told what had happened to Alice, and he realized that this was really their child now. Sophia, Celine said proudly. Beautiful. He grinned as best he could. After that, the girl sat down on the edge of the bed next to him. Will you be able to forgive me? He asked for the 100th time in her life. I think so, because you made me happy, and now you gave me a daughter, Selena cried. I'm sorry, a tear rolled down her cheek. He looked at her. I have to go now, but I'll come back tomorrow, she said and kissed him. She didn't know where she got so much love and kindness for this man. At home, she studied with the baby. Mark was also interested. He helped his mother to fill the bathtub with water to bathe Sophia. Afterwards, he rocked his little sister in his arms. Mark, do you remember Alexander? She asked him. Of course, he came to visit you many times, nodded the boy. Would you mind if he came to live with us? Selena wasn't sure about that yet, but for some reason she thought that Alexander would do exactly that. Of course not. If you will be happy with this man, then I'm all for it, especially since he is Sophia's father, hugged the boy to his mother. You are the best son, she kissed him. Now they all went to bed, and in the morning the whole family went to the hospital. Alexander could already get up. On crutches, he waddled down the steps of the hospital. Hello, Selena. Mark and Sophia were waiting for him in the street. Hello. He shook Mark's hand and kissed his girls. After that, they sat on the bench for a while, talking, and then escorted the man back. Now that time has passed, will you agree to be my wife? Alexander asked. Tell me, is it really true that everything was real with me? She asked him. Of course, Alice's eggs somehow didn't fit, but you have to ask the doctor, he answered her, and lowered his head, because he was ashamed. You know, even if it was not so, I still would not give this child to anyone. She hugged Alexander, and the goosebumps ran down her body, so she loved him. I know, my love. He pressed himself against her and realized that this was the only one who would never deceive and betray.
The weather turned bad in an instant, as if someone had accidentally knocked down the settings. The sky was covered with clouds. It became dark, and not drops, but whole jets of rain poured down on the ground. Mason, an experienced veterinarian, turned on his fog lights and slowed down. Today, he had another unfortunate animal brought to him that had been hit by a car. Luckily, kind-hearted people managed to run to the vet in time. The kitty survived. But how many of them are left to die by the roadside? It's amazing, Mason said, turning to Ava, his friend and partner. How do they run over these dogs and cats? You have to be blind. Oh, Mason, Ava replied. Animals aren't people after all. They don't always sense danger. No, argued the veterinarian. I've always said and still say they live more rational lives. especially dogs. Dogs? The woman was surprised. They're nice, of course, but they have brains. I'm sorry, my little bunny. They just don't have brains. Dogs are my weakness, Mason said passionately as he sat behind the wheel of a brand new Ford pickup truck. I've worked with all kinds of animals, but my favorite thing in the world is dogs. I love those dogs. They can't solve a math problem, but they can figure out where to get food. Isn't that intelligence? For a while, the vet and his partner drove in silence. The abominable weather was forcing him to pay maximum attention. Then the man realized that Ava might have misunderstood his words. He turned all red and blushed, and then he blurted out, "I'm sorry, dear," Mason said. "I forgot to tell you that of all the animals, I love you the most. You're the closest to me." Now it was Ava's turn to blush. He was comparing her to his patients again. However, the woman was too tactful to point out to her partner the inadmissibility of such analogies. In his compliment, even if it didn't work, he was trying. "Watch the road, darling," she said. "See how nasty the weather is. A good master wouldn't kick his dog out." Nature's mood had really turned nasty today. It was pouring rain, strong winds, and on top of that the visibility was abysmal. But the car was warm and cozy, and the body of the Ford reliably absorbed all the street noises. Powerful headlights pierced the darkness, illuminating the road for dozens of meters ahead. "Calm down, my dear," the vet said with a smile. "I'll get you there safely. My car is my fortress." "Why did you buy yourself a pickup truck?" Ava stretched out. "There's no room in the back row." The woman hated those American toys for big boys. In her mind, a pickup truck was just a waste of money. If she had her way, she would have bought a huge minivan or even a minibus that could seat a whole family, along with all the toys and stuff. Mason, though, didn't get the hint at all. Didn't buy this one back either. "Honey, the pickup is for my patients," he said. "You know it's hard for us to afford a driver and special transportation. This way, the body is at the complete disposal of the poor animals. That's great, and you won't have to inhale their odors. Even though I've told you 100 times there's nothing disgusting about them." Ava could only say nothing. She loved animals, but separately and from a distance. She could never keep more than one pet in her house, and one was a huge responsibility. But Mason's different. He's a genius in the world of veterinary medicine. He also knows how to do everything. It's like the animals lay out their symptoms to him, and he hears their complaints. "Oh crap," cussed the vet again. "These blind drivers who can't see cats and dogs have ruined my mood. And you can't even hold them accountable. I take away my license in my car for that kind of thing." Mason was sure he could pass a burning car or even a bicyclist. Past a house on fire. It's just that he'd never been in those situations before. But he's never passed a dog that's been run over. He chose his profession to be a veterinarian, an animal rescuer. Mason had dreamed of going into animal welfare at the state level, but there was no time for that. "You're such a good doctor." Eva praised him and decided to go and head on. "I think you'd be a great father too." At this point, the vet didn't hear her, immersed in his own thoughts. They had already passed the freeway and turned toward the township where their cabin was located. Those bums at the power company had done something wrong again. The lights on the tall poles weren't on. Mason turned his headlights to maximum brightness and looked at the road. He slowed his speed to 15 miles an hour. "Why aren't you saying anything?" Eva asked, not waiting for an answer to her line about her father. "I agree with you completely," the man replied. His partner glowed. "Does he really want children? He literally never leaves the side of his animals. Then he smells like God forgive him. No, he should open his own clinic a long time ago and keep his practice to a minimum. I mean, look at him. He's like an executive. And my God, he looks just like the president. Mason looks just like Mr. Bunn when he was younger. He went to law school and worked as a lawyer. Well, to each his own. If her man didn't have to work 24 hours a day, they could have had a baby a long time ago. The weather's brutal," the vet said and squinted. "I can't see our house. I'm following the instruments, honey." "Drive carefully," Ava nodded. "You can't be too careful." "I'm always careful," Mason agreed eagerly. "It's my principle. If you're not sure, don't overtake. If you don't know what's next, slow down." He wanted to say something else, but then he hit the brake. The wheels squealed, and Ava with him. They saw something on the road that made their hearts clench. Jack is a young anarchist. He's not even 20. Griff is different. He had eaten not only his dog in the revolutionary struggle, but also a few minor politicians. At 35, he's realized he's done too much for this country. Now it's just a matter of taking his rightful place somewhere at the top. And make sure that all the elite, the rich people in expensive suits, lose their capital. In this country, you can't achieve anything by your own labor, Jack resented. Yes, I have no education. Yes, I didn't finish high school. But why, pray tell, do I have to work for $10 an hour? Do I look like a volunteer? I'd rather not work at all than slave for pennies. I agree, Griff nodded. You're just young and green, but you're moving in the right direction. Yes, the world is an unfair place, and it's unfair in everything from resource allocation to wages. But it's not about money. What is it about? Jack asked. The very structure of the system, the adult anarchist explained. Until you get to the top, you're nobody. And if you're already on some floor, Trump Tower or Bush Tower, you don't want to let outsiders in. You'll smoke them out by any means necessary. Call them terrorists, abusers, gaslighters, anything to keep someone else from taking your place. Jack sighed. In his early 20s, he had all sorts of ideas in his head, often so contradictory as to be mutually exclusive. On the one hand, he wanted to be rich, to have a house where he could gather classically close friends from all over the world, to buy a huge bus to take like-minded people to rallies. On the other hand, he wished there was no money at all, that everyone got exactly what they deserved, to do the work he liked. Jack was sure that in such a world, he would have the most deserved place. But to build this marvelous order, the old had to be destroyed. Unions are being squeezed, Riff complained. Have you heard about the new reform? Now even this slave order will be gone. Feudalism is coming. Pure feudalism. Of course it is, Jack blurted out. He didn't know what the word feudalism meant, but there was no stopping the young man. It's a misunderstanding, not a reform. It looks like stupidity, but it's actually a crime. The young man read the draft of the new law, but understood nothing about it. Then he tried to understand the opinions of experts, but there were even more unfamiliar words. Perhaps he should not have skipped school lessons in such quantities. However, his left-wing comrades told him that the innovations would simply destroy labor unions, that only those unions would be preserved that fully satisfied the current government, and workers' rights would once again be trampled on. I think we should show who is the boss in this country, Jack said with heat. Like in the good old days, there was a time when workers were considered. You could buy a brand new car for half a year's wages. He read stories about movements that governments called extremist, but he realized that such a thing was unthinkable now. No one would approve of saviors who were guided only by violence. Riff, who still dreamed of getting into big politics, was not eager to engage in terror either. He was reviled by everyone, east and west. You understand, Griff said. We have to take deliberate steps. Don't forget that we have comrades behind us. And every action we take must be weighed very carefully. Party. One name for it. Jack had seen these pathetic gatherings of marginalized people, and they didn't make a good impression on him. At the best of times, there were about 20 people in attendance, and it seemed only to drink cheap beer and barbecue after a heated discussion of Marxist ideals. Of course, Griff had his sights set on a leadership position in the shop stewards union. But this organization did not inspire the young anarchist much. To be a big shot there, but only to get $20 an hour from nothing. We need an action that will get us talked about, Jack said with inspiration. We've got to get to somebody at the top of these corrupt politicians and tell them what we think of this system, where the only rights a worker has are the right to a free cremation after death. From the very top? Griff was surprised. He liked the young comrade's pressure. Maybe you're talking about that one. Don't say it, the young man demanded. He believed in all conspiracy theories combined, especially the one that every cell phone had sensors that triggered keywords, like saying president, Twin Towers, or Pentagon. Those were words he simply never said, replacing them with euphemisms. Wow, Riff marveled. I envy your tenacity. What would you like to do to him? Not him, Jack shook his head. Let's be realistic. You can't get within a stone's throw of someone you can't name. They're watching everything, controlling everything. I'm talking about the people closest to him, his loved ones. The anarchist rubbed his temples. I admit I've had similar thoughts. Nodded the young man. But how do we get people to talk about us? Murder is so petty. Kidnapping a child or a wife is inhuman, But our action must not be toothless. We must show this country that we can act, that we've been written off too soon. I think I have an idea. Griff smiled. You'll like it. It did seem like a strange idea, but it made sense to Jack. And most importantly, if they succeeded, their names would be written in gold in the history of the American resistance. It's hard to explain the friendship between man and dog. It's beyond reason. It's as if the master and his pet become one. Mr. Bine loved Wilkie. As a child, he already had a dog, Roy, a huge and obese Street Bernard. Together they grew up, the future president of the United States upward and the dog outward. The dog was smart, polite, and also very voracious. His appetite was legendary in his hometown of Benda. Give him an elephant and he would eat it, complained the grandfather of the future president, a very economical and thrifty man. Not a dog, but a ruin. But he is guarding us, the young man carefully expressed his disagreement. For such a thing you can feed him once more. Guarding? The grandfather was indignant. Yes, he did not even wake up when those hooligans wanted to steal my bike. Good thing I noticed and kicked their greedy asses. The dog really wasn't equipped to guard his grandfather's huge farm. It was an area that a dozen dogs couldn't control. But that didn't upset young Benda in the least. Only with a dog he felt a mental connection, complete mutual understanding, and for such a thing he could forgive his pet anything. Laziness in the first place. When Bind was 18 years old and was taking his college exams, Roy suddenly departed for dog heaven. At that time, the dog had already passed his second decade, but he looked very alert and healthy. Nothing foreshadowed trouble, but a king. The future president was so upset that he forbade to ever get another pet. I swear I'll never get a dog again, young Bind said. Roy's death is a great loss to me. Yeah, it's like burying a friend. What's a brother's friend? Sometimes I feel like his big carcass is right here, right next to me. I can even hear him snoring at night. The future president's greatest burden was that he was far away when his pet died. He didn't share his last hours with him, didn't give him a bowl of water, and didn't even give him a last hug. He had kept his promise for 40 years, no less. Graduated with honors from the university, where he was president of the faculty for the first election, which he won. Worked a little in his specialty, but quickly found himself in politics. And now, when the 70-year mark loomed on the horizon, a small animal appeared in his life. At a regular meeting with voters, someone called a dog breeder, and she brought 5 puppies. One of them nimbly outran the guards and fell right into Mr. Bindu's lap. He rolled over onto his back, and the president couldn't resist the temptation to pat the little dog's belly. In front of him was a shaggy-eared, odd-looking little fellow who was not the least bit embarrassed by his ornamental appearance. Unlike Roy, the little dog was small, but he had a big heart. It was love at first sight. Mr. Bine took him in his arms, and from then on they were almost never parted. Whose baby is this? The president asked excitedly, stroking the puppy on the head. Yours, the woman replied, smiling awkwardly and looking out from behind the guards. May my litter always accompany you. Mr. Bine threw up his hand in his trademark salute, though the word litter amused him. He had been given many gifts, even a plot of land on the moon, but this was the first time he had ever been given a dog. The little fellow had chosen him, though. Who is he to take the American dream away from a citizen of the United States, even if that citizen is a dog? Wacky accompanied the president like a shadow. This dog stood out from the rest of the breed. For one thing, he was smart. The little dog learned several commands and also unmistakably distinguished his people from strangers. Secondly, Pekingese was physically developed. Both front and back legs were longer and stronger. He could jump onto a sofa or chair and climb back down without hurting himself. It's a mockery of the breed, a professional dog handler called by an aide told the president. Absolutely healthy, vaccinated, but we call that kind of thing a marriage. I call him wacky, Mr. Bine replied good-naturedly, though he found the dog breeder's words discriminatory. No, such language should be avoided, even when it came to animals. The president was fond of his dog. His children were long gone, and he spent minimal time on his grandchildren for safety reasons. Only Wilkie was always there. At times, Bine felt as if the dog listened and understood him, and as if giving advice on the level of thought. Don't quarrel with the third world, the Pekingese once told him, and Bine changed his mind about introducing new restrictions. Like Roy, Wilkie didn't demand too much. He was willing to lie around for hours under the table somewhere. He'd run outside to take a piss or tackle a tougher task. He also became a general favorite of his team. Every White House staffer considered it his duty to babysit and feed Wokey. Heavy feeding, however, did not lead to obesity. The doggy remained as agile and lean as possible. But one day the dog went missing. Mr. Bynum could have sworn he'd seen the dog a few minutes ago while he was giving another interview. And then Wokey disappeared. Where had he gone? That was the question he put to his entourage. Half an hour later, a bewildered aide entered the office without knocking. The president sighed. Although he treated his subordinates leniently, Patrick knew exactly the condition. Called before reporting. "Mr. President," whispered the aide. "Mr. President, trouble, tragedy, emergency." "Well, go ahead," Mr. Bundu waved his hand. "Save me time, Patrick. We could spend it building a better future for our country." Yes, of course," nodded the aide. "But," and as the staffer finished his report, the president experienced a feeling similar to Roy's loss. Pain, longing, and incomprehension. However, he kept his feelings safely hidden this time. There was no reason for the others to see him suffer. The music was playing loudly in the car, so loud that the driver and passenger had to yell, but that was fine with them. The American wind blew through the open windows, which they both thought was the smell of freedom. At times, the young boy and his much older companion would sing along to the radio, but they bragged more about their good fortune. "I told you the White House was a thoroughfare," Griff grinned as they rode in the van. "A thoroughfare for simpletons. I'm surprised Trump hasn't taken up residence there." "Yeah," Jack nodded. "Maybe we should have had that. The president, the rich." "That?" And the guy made a meaningful gesture with his hand, as if drawing a dotted line around his neck. That's the kind of thinking that must be going through most anarchists' heads. They somehow believe that if you take a queen off the table, no more pawns can turn into queens in time. "You are out of your mind," replied the comrade. "Remember, violence is not our method. We have a specific goal and a plan. We will stick to it, then everything will work out." "Okay," the young man waved his hand. "You're smarter than that. I was sure we'd get caught, but then at least we'd be on the evening edition of Today. That's not so bad." "Silly," Griff grinned. "All you want to do is get on the news. Remember, you have to be bold but quiet. And in your vanity, don't forget your comrades. Remember how many people are behind us and how much they want us to win." Everything went easily and quickly as if by notes. The White House beckoned Griff the way a beggar is attracted to a luxurious mansion. He liked to observe this magnificent building, at least from afar, and he had long ago noticed that on the lawn, where the president likes to speak, there is a small passage between the parts of the fence. A man could never fit through it, but a dog could. The same mutt that two-faced Bynum always drags around with him. Now it was just a matter of time. While Griff, distracted the lazy cop, Jack baited the dog with a brownie. These Pekingese are voracious as hell. Grabbing the most popular dog in the U.S., the young man shoved him under the bike and carried him to the car they rented on fake ID. "You know what I'm thinking?" Griff asked, smiling. They didn't even miss him. They didn't even remember the dog. We're listening to the radio, and nobody even interrupts. Probably won't even come to their senses until we send the message. They won't wake up. Jack nodded. They don't care about the workers or the animals. They don't care about the environment. And the children. And those poor mothers who have to work instead of spending time with their daughters and sons. It's okay, we'll change the world. It's only a matter of time. When Jack was 10 years old, he first learned that robots could take over all the physical labor in the world. And that the day was not far off when human labor would no longer be necessary. You can just get everything you need for free. A plasma, a set-top box, a phone, coupons for meals at cafes. And in your free time, you can do your favorite things. Play the console, play ball, barbecue, sit at your favorite fast food restaurant. That each person will get his own house with a large backyard, attic, and gazebo. You can sleep as much as you want. Do not run early in the morning to school or the office. It's beautiful. "I'm not going to study," Jack declared to his parents, digesting these thoughts in his head. "What's the point? I'll study to be a doctor. In 10 years from now, there will be a robot doctor. Smarter than me, actually." "Ma, you've seen how these irons stitched together are cut great, right? I'll never be able to do that." "I'll wait. Pretty soon it'll be free. You'll see." But that's not what happened. Robots have already displaced humans, taking away all sorts of jobs from picking potatoes on the farm to assembling cars. But it was the industrialists and the rich who profited. The average person who wasn't ready to sit around at university had no choice but to get a job at Uber or deliver food. That's how Jack came to hate industrialists. He believed that they were responsible for the fact that most of the world is sitting in poverty, instead of getting free cottages with backyards, plasma, and console. And the only way to bring these underdogs down is through labor unions. And while Biden thinks they'll cut off the oxygen of labor with his new law, he's wrong, and he'll pay dearly for it. Mr. Biden was known for his calm. When he heard the news that his pet was missing, he didn't even change his face. Patrick, the president's closest aide and one of his closest employees, was surprised at his chief's indifference. In fact, Binda's soul was aflame. And his hands, which immediately clenched into fists to the point of pain, the man hid behind his jacket. A few hours later, Patrick returned to the Oval Office with a detailed report. Who was the last person to see Wokey? The president asked in a perfectly calm voice. Shauna, the aide shrugged. That body-positive woman from public relations. Claimed she offered him some nuggets, but our boy refused. He doesn't like spicy food. What time was this? Mr. Biden continued his questioning. No later than 11 o'clock, Patrick replied, and at 1 o'clock in the afternoon I missed the dog. The president stood up and walked around his Oval Office. Yes, this room had known more serious causes for concern, but for some reason, Mr. Binda's missing dog had hit him hard. He probably would have been less surprised to learn that a North Korean missile had reached the coast of the United States. I'll bet he was kidnapped, said the president. But by who? Who could have gotten in the way of this little rascal? Those soulless devils, such scoundrels, have nothing sacred. We must be there to help the weak. The voice of the man in authority trembled. At that moment, Patrick realized that Mr. Biden was much more deeply affected by the loss of his dog than he might at first appear. It was understandable. Wacky, everyone's favorite, was an extremely charming dog. He didn't have a single envious or unkind person in his life, except for the head cat of the White House, but that one was beyond suspicion. Maybe we should make an official statement. An aide whispered. No. The president shook his head. We need to make sure that Wokey really has been kidnapped. Get me Big Paul for a report. Quickly. Stump our minds to go through all the cameras. I need to know exactly who last saw him. And where. Copy that, shouted the assistant and rushed out the door. He only calmed down when he was given a challenge. The harder the better. It was already 8 o'clock in the evening, and still no news of Wokey's fate. Truly, the little dog moved about the White House as he pleased, and tracking her movements through the cameras proved to be no easy task. The Pekingese would not fit into some of the lenses because of its size. A minute later, Big Paul walked into the office. His nickname would have been Giant. The huge African-American, if necessary, could cover not one, but 3 recent U.S. presidents with his mighty back. The chief of security was famous not only for his physical strength, but also for his great intelligence. He was enough to create an illusion of his own indispensability in the most powerful man on earth. Mr. President, said the chief of security as he saluted and stepped into the office. Mr. Biden physically felt the rush of air that shook the big man's jacket. Every effort is being made to find your little associate. We're working closely with the FBI and the CIA. I swear to God, we'll find this doggy wherever he is. And if a single hair on his back. Easy, the president waved his hand. Kidnapping hasn't been proven yet. What do we know so far? We'd have mapped the movements of the Pekingese, said Big Paul with a serious face, and showed the tablet. The red line running through the schematic map of the building perfectly illustrated Brownian motion. There was no logic to the dog's movements. What were they wasting their time on? Maybe he was wandering somewhere on the adjacent property, Mr. Biden said. Or maybe he was accidentally picked up by some kind-hearted citizens. Wokey's image was uploaded to Sari by our recognition program, Big Paul reported. The doggy didn't show up on any cameras outside the White House. Still, that doesn't mean he hasn't escaped, the president exhaled. I want you to sweep the entire area. Think of something. While the security chief was digesting the information, the selector beeped. Patrick finally remembered to make a phone call before reporting. He'd come in twice without knocking. Had the doggy been discovered? That would be damn good news, thought the leader of the states, pressing the button. Mr. President, an aide shouted in a broken voice. Mr. President, they sent it. Those bastards sent. Okay, calm down and say it slowly, Mr. Bine demanded. What did they send? What Patrick said made the president feel a sharp pain and resentment again. But there was relief along with it, a kind of ghostly hope. The unfortunate dog, struck by an inattentive driver, was quickly moved into the cabin. The vet took only a quick glance at the little guy and immediately realized that he needed immediate help. It was possible to try to provide it right here on the road, but the only thing in the car, as it turned out, was a human first aid kit, and he needs tools and medicine for animals. All that's at home, as well as the conditions to call for help. We have to hurry. What's wrong with him? Ava asked, looking at the dog with a mixture of fear and pity. It looks like subporous, the vet replied, trying to look at the dog's pupils, but a Pekingese's eyes are wide enough to make no sense. Come on, let's go. There's no time to lose. He started the engine and handed the carcass with the sticky fur to his partner. She looked at the poor animal with disgust, but she got over herself and accepted the dog. She even cuddled him to her and began to nuzzle him. Probably forgot to take it home with him, Nason said, pressing the gas pedal. These Pekingese aren't smart enough. Pet advocates will forgive me. It's a breed trait. They can forget where they live. Well, it's hard for them to remember where they live, especially in apartment buildings. By the way, there are no such in our village. That's the trouble, cried Ava, cradling the little creature. Who could have done such a thing to this adorable little thing? She wrapped it in the towel she took with her to the fitness club. A slim figure was extremely important to a woman. She was afraid that if she got fat, Mason would stop paying attention to her altogether. Listen, is your heart beating? The vet asked, looking at the road. We'll be home in a couple minutes. Ava concentrated. Through the cloth of the towel, she could feel the dog breathing. It was like he was snoring, but quietly. I can't hear his heart, but I can feel his breathing, she replied. I think he's alive. What are you gonna do? We should check him out, the man said, parking in front of the house. I could take him to work, but it's 30 miles away. We'll treat him right here in our house. So no more soap operas. I'm sorry, darling. Together they rented a small house in the Washington suburbs, and they paid rent equally, as Ava insisted. Although her income was very modest, she was an intern at a law firm and was going to make a career as a lawyer. Mason, though well off, spent a good half of his income on animals. He was obsessed with his little brothers. Follow me, the vet demanded, striding quickly to the door. As he walked, he took out a key and opened the lock. Their house was very modest, one bedroom, a living room, kitchen, and a tiny hallway with a bathroom, and a small garage, nothing without it. Mason quickly cleared the table of whatever was in his way and spread out a clean sheet. The same linen set Ava had given him for their anniversary. At this point, though, she was willing to forgive her partner's inattention. Get some water in the basin, the vet demanded, putting the dog down, and find a rag of some kind. The woman rushed to comply. Mason himself was preparing an IV and a surgical instrument. He quickly found the wound of the dog's right leg. The cut, however, was small. There was no point in suturing it. He thoroughly cleaned the wound and then the whole dog. Pekingese have long hair, which made it difficult to see. The vet checked his pulse, put a thermometer in, barely found the vein to insert a catheter, put it in an IV. A Pekingese, Mason stretched out, trying to take up the silence. A mestizo, I'd say. Not exactly breed standardized. I think he's cute, the woman said. I don't care what the standards are. The doggy still wouldn't regain consciousness. The car must not have hit him, just hit him with a bumper or a wheel. Maybe the driver was trying to avoid a hit and run. That's why the doggy went into a deep sleep. We can't rule out head trauma, the vet said. Must be a concussion. He's completely unresponsive to external stimuli. Some dogs sleep like the dead, though. Will he live? Eva asked in a frightened voice. She thought it would be a terrible shock for her to see a sweet dog die. After something like that, she'd have to go to a counselor for years to heal the trauma. I guess so, Mason answered her, taking off his rubber gloves. If he makes it through the morning, I'll take him to X-ray right away. We need to check all the bones, run some tests. I think we should show him to Frank. He's a specialist in these little things. Let's go to bed soon, honey, she asked, putting her arm around the man's shoulders. This adventure has worn me out so much. No, he said. The patient is unstable. I must stay with him and stay here all night. Go to bed without me, dear." Even though Mason was a very disciplined doctor, he still fell asleep with his hands in hand on the table. And when the son woke him up at 6 in the morning, the appearance of the Pekingese veterinarian was quite surprising and even puzzled him. Big Paul stepped aside, letting Patrick pass. There was literally no face on him. In his hand he held a clear baggie, and inside it, "So," said Mr. Bind, looking at his assistant, "what's the news?" Although the president was not young, he had a peculiar aura of authority about him. In his presence, people became timid and ingratiating. It's hard to tell if it was just because of the gentleman's position or something else. Mr. Binda's smile broad and reassured. Housewives who spend a good half of their day watching TV and social media were willing to give him far more than their own vote. "Kidnapped," the aide exhaled. "Stolen. What makes you so sure they have walkie?" the imperious man asked. "It wasn't hard to guess," the aide replied, wiping away tears. He placed a clear bag on the table in front of his boss. Inside was a red collar with a chip. The man examined the message carefully. There could be no mistake. Those soulless bastards had removed everything that would help identify Wokey. Except for one little trinket, however. "So we're dealing with a kidnapping," Mr. Bynes said calmly. "Yeah, that was a tough scenario to calculate. You know, you can prepare for any kind of sneak attack, but even that's too much. You were right to put all this stuff in a clear bag. You didn't touch it." "No," the assistant nodded. "Only with gloves." Looking at the determined leader, Patrick calmed down too. He wiped his tears and felt ashamed that he had let his feelings out. However, the president appreciated him for his sincerity. He needed just such an employee, intelligent but direct. "You can't overlook the calculation," Patrick said. "I've scrutinized the code. All they can be charged with is animal cruelty, and that's if they don't feed and walk it. Technically, a dog is considered property, but we're not talking." "What a cute dog," Jack marveled, "playing with Wacky. Look, he brings the balloon too." With these words, the anarchist threw the rugger toy to the farthest end of the room. Wagging his tail, the Pekingese dashed after the ball. He grabbed the ball and galloped to his captor, which caused him genuine delight. "What a sweet dog." Riff mocked him. "I'm going to cry. Let's make a video with him." And circulate it on social media. "That's a great idea," Jack said excitedly. "Is it okay that we kidnapped him?" "That's what I'm telling you, asshole," Riff said and slapped his partner in the face. "What are we, bloggers or students? We're working class. We have a goal. And we've identified the means available to achieve it." "But Waki's so cute," Jack argued, rubbing the back of his head. "He's so cool. Does our class struggle concern dogs too?" "It touches everything," Riff replied calmly. "Don't get used to him. A dog is just a thing. The bigwigs have even made nature work for them. Do you know how many hundreds of bucks a distant ancestor of a wolf like this is worth? I'm telling you, don't get attached to that colt on legs, because if that stubborn old man refuses to do what we want." Riff made a meaningful gesture, showing how the noose tightened around his neck, and pointed his finger at Wokey. He hesitated and sat on his hind legs. It looked as if he had understood his captor's words perfectly. "All right," Jack nodded. "Here's what I'm thinking. Maybe we should contact the press. Tell them what we've done." "Dumbass," Riff shouted. "We don't want cheap publicity. We have a goal in mind, you know. If the old devil repeals union reform, we'll give him the dog. And if he doesn't, you know, we gotta go all the way." "See, I've been thinking," Jack went on. "Usually kidnappers somehow keep in touch with the people they're trying to influence. It's like that in all the movies and some of the games. And we just kind of threw out the demands and that's it. What if they have questions?" Riff thought for a moment. His uneducated comrade's words had some common sense, but contacting the White House was too risky. They must be searching for that little Pekingese. They'll trace the call with ease. "Let's read up on our action," Riff suggested. He opened Google, typed Wokey into the search box and began to study. Nothing. There wasn't even any news about his disappearance. But as it turns out, the Pekingese leads a busy life. Accompanied his master in his trips to Europe, the Middle East, and even Australia, Riff felt a sharp envy. He had never even traveled outside the United States in his life. He'd never even been to the sea or the mountains. And here's some hulking mockery of nature who's traveled halfway around the world, just because his master is the president of America. How unfair the world is. Victory. shouted Jack. "Buddy, we won." The boy ran up to his comrade, hugged him, and began to jump. Wokey, too, stood on his hind legs and turned around several times as if to share the cheers. Griff stared at his mate for a while, disbelieving his optimism. Then he took his cell phone from his hands and began to read the news that caused such a wave of enthusiasm in the young man. "Victory?" He was indignant. "You call this a victory?" "Yes," he nodded. "They suspended the reform. Exactly what you and I wanted. Now we have to get the dog back." "Suspended, not canceled." Griff shouted. "We have to go all the way." Jack scratched his head and sat down. He scrutinized the news again, racking his brain. It did indeed say that the reform was suspended pending consultations with the expanded Council of Trade Unions, the very one in whose interests all this fuss had been started. "Right," Jack whispered. "Those bastards, they almost had me fooled." "What am I telling you?" said the Griff, a frightful smile on his face. "They're like hustlers, they'll get you around. You stick with me, you won't lose." The anarchist already had a new plan of action in his head, and what he was going to do would not please anyone, not even young Jack, his faithful friend and comrade. It had been a full day since Wacky had gone missing. Mr. Bind had canceled all meetings and events to focus on finding his pet. Journalists competed in speculation as to what could have caused this behavior. There were various versions, from unknown illness of the president to banal fatigue. Patrick entered the office. His red eyes showed that he had slept for a couple of hours during the night. "Good morning, Chief," he said. "Alas, no results. What we can say with certainty is that they were well-trained men. Maybe they were trained in China or Iran." "Have our experts studied the message?" Mr. Bind asked. "And the manifesto?" "They have," Patrick nodded. "Nothing. No skin cells, no fingerprints. Nothing. Delivered from the post office by quadricopter. We made a request to the operator's company for nothing. Professionals," Mr. Bind said as if you were praising the kidnappers. "Calculated everything down to the last detail. And after my tactical move, there were attempts to contact us. Nothing." Mr. Bind waved his hands. "They are waiting and silent. We have no contact with the kidnappers." Mr. Bind felt guilt again, as he had with Roy years ago. Maybe Wilkie's not alive anymore, and he didn't even spend his last hours with him, didn't give him a bowl of water, didn't pat his ears. It's a shame to lose a friend, especially when they're taken away by scoundrels just because you're president. "I don't want publicity," the president said. "If the press asks questions, deny everything. Pretend it's not happening." "But Mr. Bind," the aide began to argue. "What if the voters think the president's a liar? According to public opinion polls, Wokie is the most recognizable member of the Oval Office, more popular than my vice president, Bind squinted, than the Secretary of State." "Yes," said the aide. "Wokie's rating is a good dozen points higher. Let's be objective. Your whole office is a shabby mess. In the 3 years we've been working in Washington, everyone's got skeletons, the vice president and the Secretary of State. Hell, even you." "Go on," Mr. Bind nodded. He valued his assistant not only for his loyalty, but also for his ability to take the bitter truth for granted. "A dog is a different matter," Mr. Bind said. "It is impossible not to love her. According to recent polls, only ardent cat people have a negative attitude toward Wokie, and not all of them. I'm afraid the disappearance of your doggy could seriously hurt ratings and also make citizens feel insecure. Remember why Trump lost? When there was a pandemic raging around the world, he pretended it wasn't happening." "I can understand that," sighed Mr. Bind. "But the people wanted safety," the aide exclaimed. "They wanted vaccines and all that. That's why you didn't win the second round. I think the older comrade waved his hand in the direction of the coffee table. Jack looked at it in bewilderment. There was a tourniquet, hydrogen peroxide and bandages, and a garden pruner on the tabletop. How had he missed all that equipment? The boy looked at his mentor. "What the hell is this?" he asked. "It's simple," Riff shrugged. "Those rascals don't want to fulfill our demands. Heck, they even almost had you fooled. What are we going to do?" Jack wondered. "Every day they cut off a piece of your future," the older comrade instructed. "Little by little, so that you don't feel a thing. It's time for you to do the same." "I didn't get it," the young man admitted frankly. He wasn't very good with metaphors. "We'll bite off his paw," Riff replied. "We'll send it to the president of the rich in a box, and let him try not to cancel union reform." The young man stood as if struck by thunder. His face was suddenly pale, as if it had been discolored. "You're not serious now, are you?" Jack asked with a silly smile, "Because I've never personally cut off a dog's legs." "Relax, buddy," the older man said. "It's just an animal. It's not smart. It's not human. You have to tie a tourniquet, squeeze the secateurs, and that's it. Then peroxide it. He's got 4 legs. He's got a lot to spare." Jack turned even paler. He pictured the scene and he felt sick. He felt dizzy and sat down on a chair to keep from falling to the floor. Wokey woke up and lifted his muzzle, watching his captors. "This is an important part of the party struggle," Griff persuaded his sidekick. "Our ancestors blowed for the leftist cause, and you can't even cut off a dog's paw. You're weak. I don't think you're ready for the decisive struggle that the working class expects from us." Jack remained silent. There were heavy thoughts in his head. When they first started this business, he had no idea how far it would go. "By the way, I've been talking to someone," Griff continued, "and they promised me a good position in the union, the kind of position where you need your own assistant. And hell, I know just who I can give the job to." "What, you're going to work for free again?" Jack asked with no enthusiasm. "No, we'll get you the proper paperwork," said his partner. "You'll get bit salary and take your revolutionary struggle to the next level. You can finally finish college, take some courses where they'll teach you how to speak properly. That's all it takes." Griff made a gesture as if he were cutting paper with his fingers and was gone. Jack was left alone with Wacky. He was fully awake and looking good-naturedly at his captor. He seemed to be smiling, as he always did. The young man thought that his older friend was right about something. After all, it was only a dog. Aren't there many of them running around on the streets? On the other hand, he had already spent a few days of his life with this little guy. "Oh, brother, what are we going to do with you?" Jack sighed and looked over the young animal breeder's kit. First, he had to know where to apply the tourniquet. Second, somehow immobilize the dog. The very idea of stripping a living creature of its limbs seemed inhuman to him. Of course, he could do something like that to people he thought were scoundrels. All those bankers, financiers, politicians, and other investors. But this was a dog, a defenseless little dog, one he'd grown to like over the past few days. Jack thought that before he lost his paw, Wokey needed a good walk. Enjoy life. He even wanted to ride his bike to the store and buy him something nice. But there wasn't much money left, so he couldn't fulfill that noble impulse. "Don't be afraid of anything," said the young man. "Until the Griff comes back, I won't do anything. I'll make him buy some painkillers. In the meantime, we'll play." Just as they were planning their action, Griff and Jack fenced off a small area behind the house with netting. A prisoner needs a walk. He's a dog, not a person. The Pekingese felt perfectly well in this modest cubbyhole and did not even show that the captivity was weighing him down. The dog brought a ball and put it in front of Jack. "Do you want to play soccer?" the kidnapper asked, tossing the toy. "Come on, let's play." He tossed the ball to Wacky and he brought it back. Even on his short legs, the dog covered the distance of the yard in just a few seconds. He knew neither fatigue nor doubt. His long fur fluttered as he raced toward his goal. Once again fetching the ball, Wokey carelessly spit it out. The toy rolled under the porch. "Oh shit," said Jack. "You're clumsy, buddy." "All right, brother, don't worry, I'll get it. It's a piece of cake." For several minutes, the young anarchist tried to retrieve the ball from under the porch. He could see it through the gap, but the toy had rolled too far away for him to reach it by hand. Eventually, Jack guessed to grab a stick to push the ball toward him. It was a good 10 minutes before he managed it. Sweat beaded on his forehead from the exertion. "He did it," shouted the young man, tossing the ball in his hand. "Catch it, Wacky, Wacky? Hey, buddy, where are you?" Jack looked around, but the dog was nowhere to be found. He thought the dog had gone back to the house. The door was open. He went into the living room and called out to Wacky. No sign of him. He looked under the couch, behind the curtain, in the bathroom, even in the closet. No one. He whistled, clapped his hands, smacked his lips. The baby didn't respond to his calls. "Where could he have run off to?" said the young anarchist in fear, running around the house. "Come back, Wacky. We'll touch your paw. I swear it." But the dog did not respond. Then Jack decided to watch the doggy outside. The lot was very small, with no bushes or buildings of any kind. Could it have gotten under the fence? The boy rushed to the netting they had stretched along the fence. As Jack examined it, he saw something that made him fearful. Big Paul, immediately dismissed the feminist theory. Yes, two of them had been hanging around near where Mr. President's dog had disappeared. They rode up to the White House on electric scooters. "Don't talk about things you don't understand, Mr. Biden sighed. Just do your job. Leave the political nuts and bolts to me, okay? We're gonna lift everybody up," Big Paul said with inspiration. "The whole city, the whole state, the whole country, the whole world if we have to." "No," the president interrupted him. "I don't approve. Keep it subtle. No one must know that Waki has been kidnapped." As the African American left the office, a message came in. The scored messenger was considered the safest and most secure. After reading the message from a man even more secretive than scored, the president felt some relief and a sense of hope. Standing in front of the fence, Jack scratched his head in confusion. Had the little man circled him? Obviously, the prisoner had escaped, and had done so in the most audacious manner possible. The plastic netting that was supposed to keep the doggy out had been chewed through, as neatly as if Woki had a pattern with him. Exactly where the distance between the fence and the ground was maximized, and how much does the Pekingese need to crawl? Swinging over the fence, Jack darted down the street. He ran first one way, then the other. To the left and right, identical houses, identical cars. Only now he noticed that the whole village consisted of identical cottages, similar to each other, like twins. Jack walked back to the house Griff had rented and tried to control the trouble that had come over him. Bent to the ground to look for signs of the doggy, but the last week had been eerily dry. No paw prints. Looked around for cameras. No, Griff had deliberately chosen a township without video surveillance. He hated being watched. "Calm down, Jack," the young man urged himself. "It's just a Pekingese, a decorative breed with the brains of a goldfish. How far did he get on his crooked legs?" Jack decided to do a methodical sweep of the entire village. If he had an analytical mind, he would have realized that such a task would be difficult to accomplish alone. There were 400 identical economy class houses in this suburb. They are spread over 20 streets, straight as a string. If it weren't for the huge signs with numbers, it would be easy to get lost. Jack got on his bike and began to cut circles. He called out to the little dog and held a ball in his hand to get his attention. But the young anarchist remembered whose doggy they had kidnapped, so from the outside the search looked strange. He just whispered the name, "Waki, Waki," and squeaked the ball. "Get out of here," some old lady yelled. "I got grandkids next door." "It's all right, ma'am," Jack replied. "I'm just looking for my little friend. He escaped through the netting, you know." "I'll call the police now," the woman continued. "People like you should be isolated." The young man wanted to say something offensive, but he bit his tongue. What if the old hag really did call the cops? Then he'd be in trouble. On the way back, he suddenly had a new problem. He'd completely forgotten where Griff lived. He'd forgotten the street and cottage number out of excitement. "I'd better really cut that traitor's foot off," shouted the anarchist. Now a man in his 40s looked at him suspiciously, looking like a Latino. He stopped Jack in the manner of a horseman trying to rein a wild horse. The anarchist had no choice but to slow down. "Who do you think you're going to cut the foot of?" the Latino asked in a husky voice. "Did Pedro send you to scare me?" "No, senor," replied the anarchist. "It is I who ride and sing the song. You better cut off the traitor's foot." "What are you saying?" The man wouldn't stop. "Pedro sent you. Answer me." "I have no idea who Pedro is," Jack sighed. "Let me go, please." "All right, get out of here," the Latino hissed. "But if you ever show up on 9th Street again, you're on your own." 9th. That's the same street where Griff lives. Thank God I found the house. Jack circled the lot once more, calling loudly for Wacky. The answer was silence. He resented the behavior of the locals. He had a tragedy, and they're pestering him with some incompetence. 3 o'clock in the afternoon, a weekday. Doesn't anyone go to work at all? We need to take another good look around, the guy thought. That Dutch bag Griff's gonna skin me. He's gonna send my paw to the president. Shit, I'm gonna get myself into this mess. When Griff parked his car near the cottage, he immediately had a feeling that something was wrong. First, the gate was wide open. Secondly, the doors to the cottage were also wide open. Thirdly, neither the dog nor his accomplice was anywhere to be seen. Wookie? Griff heard a shriek. Wacky, get out. Strengthened in his suspicions, the man rushed into the house. There he saw only a confused boy. In his hand he clutched a ball and squeaked at it. The young man looked away and pretended to be looking intently for something. "Where is our prisoner?" Griff asked. "You're gonna curse, boss," Jack replied. "You're gonna cuss. I tried to do your bidding, and he broke free and ran away." "What?" the older man whispered. "Ran away? Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I did?" Jack was outraged. "If you hadn't been out there and left me alone with that dog, none of this would have happened." The men began to swear and shout at each other. In the heat of their quarrel, they went out into the street, where they continued the debate with renewed vigor. "You young people don't understand a damn thing about revolutionary struggle," shouted Griff. "All you want is chips, beer, and consoles. Our ancestors shed blood, and you—" "What?" Jack argued. "You think you were the one who spilled blood. You didn't even want to get your hands dirty and run away. I'll give you a—" With these words, the young man clenched his fist and raised his hand high. Fighting was not in the plans of Griff. In addition, he was not sure that he could cope with this young laggard. "All right, calm down," said the older man. "Truce. 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The sun is still high. We must act. Now." Watching from his hiding place the pathetic efforts to find him, Wokey seemed to smile. Most likely the dog was just opening his mouth to take a deep breath. But who knows what goes on in a little doggy's head? The intern's lot wasn't easy. At the law firm where she worked, they were always trying to put all the hard work on her. So she stayed late tonight. She had a hard time getting to Mason's house, first by train, then by bus. She walked another 20 minutes. It was almost 12 o'clock when she opened the door. "Good evening," her man said. He was sitting on the couch with the rescued dog. "Is he feeling better?" Ava asked. She was as worried about the little one as she was about her own brother. "A miraculous healing," smiled Mason. "He just got into good hands in time. You know, it's so awful when you can't save a patient." "Oh, Mason," Ava sighed. "You should have kids right now. I wish you put your energy in the right place." But the vet didn't hear those words again because he was scrutinizing Wokey's belly. The doggy was recovering quickly. Already on the second day he had an appetite, and on the third day he began to cut circles around the house. One thing was bad. Now Ava was jealous of the charming Pekingese. "You won't even ask me how I'm doing," she said. "And why don't I come home until 12? "It's pretty obvious," Mason smiled. "You're a workaholic." "Maybe I have a lover," Ava asked. "A big African-American guy?" "Don't be ridiculous," the vet said. "I know that you would never trade your career for some miserable pleasures." The man's words somehow cheered up the aspiring lawyer. She was really messing with a truth-teller. Luckily, Mason guessed to order a pizza, which was in a box in the kitchen. Ava heated up a slice, ate it with a Coke, and felt a little better. "Honey," she said, trying to come at it from the other side. "Yes, I stay at work sometimes, but have you ever seen me carry my papers in here?" "Sorry, honey, I don't pay attention to that sort of thing at all," the vet shrugged. "I'm not likely to notice any papers. Besides, don't forget it's not safe to keep them here now. We got pet." That was too much. Ava wasn't about to share her man with some dog. Besides, no pets in a house with children. And this is the result of the theme of children he does not want to develop, but animals want. However, as a true lawyer, Ava was not going to attack head-on. She needed a clever maneuver, thanks to which she could get her way. "Strange," the woman said. "I started my relationship with a law-abiding man. Now I'm with a real criminal." "Such a nice dog," said the vet. "I'll keep him." "No way," Ava exhaled. "He has an owner. We have to find him." "Find the owner?" Mason asked. "Is that what you call the man who abandoned this beautiful baby to his fate?" "No, I can't part with this creature anymore. Look how he smiles." "Honey," Ava said, "first of all, it's illegal to take someone else's property. Secondly, just think what's going through the mind of the real owner of this ball of fur. He must be worried sick." "Nonsense," the vet said. "I dropped the picture off to our guys. They looked through all the missing pet ads. There's nothing like it. By the way, they're only looking for 3 Pekingese, but 2 of them are females, so ours is out right away." Okay, thought Ava, but in her head she already had a plan to solve the problem, quickly and efficiently. It had been several days since unknown criminals had stolen Wokey. Fortunately, the press hadn't noticed the baby's disappearance yet. Mr. Bine caught himself thinking that he was able to get over the loss of his Pekingese, and although the pain of the loss grated on his heart, he was able to coexist with it. "I have a report," the aide said. Contacting the president. When will you be in? The unexpectedly cheerful voice gave Mr. Binder hope. He told him to come in at once. A couple minutes later, a cheerful Patrick appeared at the door. The assistant was hiding something under a towel. Something small. Had his luck just run out? Here, look, Mr. President. Patrick smiled, removing the towel. He was holding a Pekingese in his arms. Found it? Mr. Bind exclaimed. He couldn't hide his joy. My boy, come here. Not you, Patrick. Give me that furry little bugger. The president accepted the burden and brought Wacky to him. Hugged him, rubbed his belly, but the dog didn't respond to the caresses. In fact, he tried to pull away. He even whimpered a little. That's not Wacky, said the president, returning the animal to the aide. No, Patrick agreed. It's Toki. I figure if we can't get a double, we might as well pick a successor. Look, they look like two peas in a pod. Mr. Bind sighed. Yes, it's politics. All you have to worry about is ratings. But somehow he was not impressed by this approach. Maybe a successor was a good thing for the voter, but you still shouldn't have hurt him like that. What's the plan? The president asked. A press conference in 15 minutes, Patrick replied. Here, I prepared the talking points. He held out a small folder of papers. Binda's memory was fading, and without a cheat sheet, he felt uncomfortable in front of the press. However, having spent more than 30 years in politics, he had learned to say meaningless talking points that would fit any issue. Good afternoon, said the president, raising his hand in greeting. We have gathered for a small briefing. Mr. Bind, shouted a pretty girl with bright red hair. How long are we going to tolerate the overpopulation of Chinese goods in our retail network? Thank you for your question, replied the president. As you know, fighting inflation is our priority. Therefore, we simply have to look for goods that would have a competitive price, and we can't close the market to them. What should our American producers do? The red-haired girl was indignant. Compete, Mr. Bind answered briefly, which drew a small round of applause. Everything went on from there. The moderator would point to a member of the media, and he would ask the question. We went through the Middle East, gun ban, juvenile delinquency, and other topics in which Mr. Bind was a real ace. But suddenly the familiar pattern faltered. Mr. President, one of the reporters called out, ignoring the moderator. The pool colleague who was supposed to ask the question was simply pushed back by his mighty back. May I ask a question for the stuffy news? Go ahead, nodded the president, though he didn't like the disrupted order. There are reports in the media that Wokey has been captured, the reporter said. How can you comment on this news? Then let's go together, said the big man. Every dog here knows me. Do dogs run away too? Jack asked, as if inadvertently. Yes, the man nodded and put his big paw on Jack's back. The last time was a week ago. We found him in no time. Thanks for your help, mister. But I can handle it, the anarchist said. No need to worry. I won't take no help from you, the man said. I have a lot of experience, if anything. Okay, there's not a minute to lose. In the meantime, the Griff was making his tour of the settlement. Alas, a brilliantly executed operation had ended in total failure. Wacky was gone for good this time. There's no way he's gonna get any attention now. It looked like a great idea. There's no liability for kidnapping animals for political purposes. It's not stealing. No one would have to be killed. However, he still had one more idea. Even if this dog escaped, he, Griff, could make a lot of money. But you have to act fast, before someone found the dog and returned it to its owner. In the morning, while Ava and Mason were getting ready for work, Wokey was always running around. The girl couldn't figure out what was bothering her. Sure enough, she'd seen that animal somewhere before. I think it was in her ribbon, except that Pekingese had a red collar. Listen, Ava asked, does that little dog remind you of anyone? Mason could list a dozen of his patients from memory who looked the same, give or take. Young male, up to 4 years old, you can tell by the teeth. Healthy and inspected. Fortunately, the injury was not serious. He's finally recovered. We'll have to keep an eye on the dog, though, see if he has other injuries he didn't notice. He reminds me of a dog that's been hurt by careless people. Mason sighed. What was the owner thinking? No collar, no chip. Nothing at all. What are we going to do? Ava asked. We keep it, the vet shrugged. Of course, I like bigger breeds, but Pekingese have their own charm. You know, they're so small and desperate warriors. If he likes us, he'll stand up for us. and he started giving his girlfriend a whole lecture on what a Pekingese is. That the breed had been bred centuries ago in China, that the little dogs were intelligent and loyal. At times like this, the woman usually had something on her mind. Mason was impossible to stop. "You know what?" suddenly she asked. "I think he's just cute. Look at him smile. But that's no reason to break the law." They looked at the Pekingese. He was really very handsome and charming. Looking at his rescuers, the dog opened his mouth a little. If you wanted, it could be taken for a smile. The vet brightened up and rubbed his patient on the scruff of the neck. He figured a dog like that would definitely want to play ball, or even frisbee. Their mornings getting ready for work were the most enjoyable time spent together. Mason could make breakfast, or Ava could make sandwiches. Then they have coffee together while they drove the car. Today was the first day since the Pekingese had been found that the vet had decided to leave him at home rather than bring him to work. In principle, they tolerate loneliness well. The man said as he drove the car. "It's okay, I'll walk him tonight." "Do you want me to tell you what he looks like?" Ava smiled slyly. Mason nodded, and his partner's answer puzzled the experienced veterinarian. It even sent him into a mild shock. Arriving at the office, the girl immediately logged onto Facebook. She took a close look at Binda's page, and then did something that made her heart sink. Even though Mason wouldn't have approved of it, Ava took a few pictures and sent them to the president's account, stating that the Pekingese had been found in the Washington, D.C. suburbs without being overly precise in the description. Within 10 minutes, she received the message, and she couldn't believe what she read. When Mason returned from work that evening, he found neither the dog nor his woman. It seems Ava had packed in a hurry because everything had been turned over in places. Although the daring action had ended in failure, Griff was not sad. Now he had money and also motivation to hack further. Soon, very soon, he would take his rightful place among the elite. That's what they're really like. Stupid, clumsy, lazy. The suspension of union reform is over. A sure sign that the dog has been found. Let's just say he made his money, except his young accomplice has disappeared. He's probably upset about his failure. Well, let him suffer. This kid will still be useful to him, so do not lose touch with him. Maybe they can do something cooler in the future. Keep him close. We should get a couple or 3 more of these performers who aren't burdened with too much intelligence. Where have you been? Griff asked, watching Jack enter the house. I've been looking for a black cat named Wacky, with a huge black guy, who also almost beat me up when we first met. So, Griff yawned. Did you find him? Yeah, Jack answered. I had a hard time convincing them the cat wasn't mine. Those animal advocates wouldn't believe me. They drove me around the state all night. I can't remember it. You know, Jack, you may have failed, Griff said, but we can still continue our work, cooperating for the common goal of protecting workers' rights. Like hell we can, he replied, opening the refrigerator and pulling out a can of beer. He opened it and took a sip with pleasure. Griff jumped on the spot in surprise. Why was the kid so upset with him? So what if he went for a ride with the animal protectors? It was an adventure. Besides, it's his own fault. Did you think I wouldn't figure it out? Jack asked irritably, pointing at his cell phone. Do you take me for an idiot? Griff looked at the screen. Escaped or stolen? Read the headline. Below it were pictures of the president's dog, the same one the news agency had given him a lot of money for. In one of them, he had no trouble identifying his own laminate. Jack must have gotten over it too. Relax, buddy, the ringleader said conciliatingly. All I did was drop them pictures to get some publicity for our action. When I realized the dog had escaped. Where's the rights thing? Jack was indignant. Where is it about workers? Not a word. So they lied to me, Griff shrugged. But it doesn't matter. No, you're the one who cheated. The young man shouted, I'm leaving. My mom said, don't trust leftists. I'm going to her. Where will you go? Griff smiled. You're nothing. You're a total zero. You can't even write. You have to start from scratch. Go back to school, for example. You're just reading my mind, Jack replied angrily. The first thing I'll do is get my diploma. And a profession. I've had enough of this fight of yours. But he didn't have time to go back to school. A few hours later, Jack was sobbing and testifying at the police station and assured the officers that he'd done nothing wrong. Griff was brought to the station a little later thanks to his intuition. He left the house shortly before the arrival of law enforcement officers. But he didn't get far. Angle was gone for a second day. She hadn't returned his calls and ignored his messages. Mason felt devastated. Ava had been gone for 2 days. She hadn't returned his calls and ignored his messages. Mason felt devastated. "Honey," he dictated a message to her. "Please, I will take time off work to spend time with you. I will listen to you carefully and never interrupt you. I will never, ever take someone else's. Do you hear me? Call me back, okay? Kisses." The second cause for concern is the Pekingese. Why did Ava take him? It makes sense, though. She must have found the real owner, gave it back to him, and decided not to do business with him, Mason, anymore. The vet, devastated by his partner's behavior, couldn't do anything. He just sat there staring at the ceiling. The phone brought him out of his reverie. Had she decided to call? The number was unfamiliar. "Mr. Mason?" It was a thick bass, so low you could drill through a wall. "Yes," the man answered. "To whom do I have the honor of speaking?" "I represent the government," the man replied quickly. "We'd like to ask you to step out onto the back patio for a few minutes, right now." The back patio. The vet was surprised. "It's kind of dirty out there." "We can see that," answered the caller. And yet, Mason was confused. Had she notified the police as well? Then he'd be in a lot of trouble. He'd have to find a lawyer right away. The vet knew these guys charged a fortune for their clients, although he recently treated a cat that belonged to a lawyer. What was his name? Gathering his strength, Mason headed for the back door. Still, you gotta hand it to the police. They could have come in through the front door and the neighbors without noticed. There's a small chance of saving face. "Hello," said the vet, opening the door, and he couldn't believe his eyes. A real delegation had gathered just outside his house. At the very gate stood a man, a huge African-American man with a good-natured face. "This big guy's on TV all the time. What's his name?" Just behind him, on his right hand, stood a woman in a strict suit and smiled sternly. And on his right hand was a typical American with a white smile. A little farther away, thoughtful crestfallen man kept a watchful eye on the surroundings. A good dozen cars with government license plates could hardly fit on a small road. One of them carried small American flags. "Good evening," Mason said, and wished he'd worn something decent before going out on the back patio. He embarrassed himself by shucking his robe, underneath which was an old t-shirt stained with stains. "Greetings," nodded the head of the delegation. "I apologize for the lack of notice. It's all a security precaution." "No big deal," shrugged the vet. "Thank you for stopping by." "On behalf of Mr. President, I thank you," said the big man on the TV. "What's his name?" He held out a chubby hand. "Thank you," Mason nodded, returning the handshake. "But what is he thanking me for? I voted for a rival in the last election. I even got drunk when buying one." "You can come up and ask," the visitor smiled. "Only if we accompany you." The three of them approached the black car with the flags. One of the windows rolled down and the vet saw a Pekingese. It was sitting in Mr. Binda's arms. It was wearing the same red collar around its neck. "Thank you for your humanity," the president said. "You've done a great deal for us." "Really, you don't have to thank me," Mason replied calmly. "I'm not going to vote Democrat in the election anyway." "You have a beautiful woman," Mr. Bine continued, "with a big heart. She told how you spared no effort or time in getting Walkie out. We'll be sure to tell that story." "The woman?" Mason asked. "Where is she?" "Oh, she's being interviewed at one of our offices right now," the president replied. "I swore we'd find the best use for her talents." "I called," said the vet. Thank you again for doing this." The president interrupted him, waved his hand, and the window closed. The delegation in expensive cars disappeared as quickly as they had appeared. The veterinarian watched them with his mouth open. What was happening reminded him of some cheap humor show. He went back into the house, poured himself a whiskey, and tried to cope with his emotions. It wasn't working. He was brought to his senses by a phone call. "Honey, it was Ava. I'm sorry I didn't call you yesterday. I was strongly advised not to." "Okay," Mason said. "Are you gonna be there today?" "Yes, wait for me as usual," the woman said. "And again, I'm sorry about that. By the way, I found a new job." "I'm aware of that," the vet replied. "The president told me." Big Paul was a little unhappy with himself. By the time he managed to apprehend Jack and Griff, the doggy had already been returned. A chain of coincidences, the kind that's hard to believe. And this chick asks so many questions. She looks good though, very appetizing. Bringing these crooks to justice won't be easy, Big Paul said. We have to be discreet. As the White House representative in this matter, I will exercise the utmost restraint, Ava replied, and discretion. They're denying everything, the chief of security continued, and there are certain difficulties of a purely legal nature. Oh, leave that to us, Mr. Paul, the woman interrupted. I'm sure we can find the right wording. If only we were willing. You're a very interesting girl. Big Paul decided to go on the attack. I'd love to have a drink with you, or two, or get to know you better. You know what I mean? I'm sorry, Mr. Paul, but you're going to have to keep your distance, Ava told him off. I would never trade my job for dubious pleasures. Besides, I have a husband waiting for me at home. Hell no, the security chief grinned. I looked at your profile. You're single. But you weren't looking ahead, were you? Ava smiled. Oh, I have a very caring and loving husband. He adores our children, future children. You know what I mean, don't you?
Thank you for watching this video to the end. Subscribe to the channel. Like it, write comments if you like the story, and see you on the channel.